Okay, yeah, we're live. Hi, guys. Okay.
Program as much as possible. And
it is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Is it possible that there are no coincidences?
Oh, it's already doing the glary thing. Wow.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
welcome, everyone, to the Cast 'em Off Radio Fringe Files. I'm your host, Brandon Schwinn, and this is episode number 7 of our Fringe Files program. Good news for all you Fringe Files lovers out there. We are ramping it up. It has been, when we've done the show in the past, it has been pretty sporadic. Just whenever I felt like bringing a guest on that I could trust, and it really wasn't my main focus this show. But we're changing gears. I'm actually going to be focusing on this show and Cast 'em Off Radio as well. So if you've only watched this program, if you've never watched Cast 'em Off Radio, I would encourage you to check that out. But we are going to start ramping up the Fringe Files. I'm going to try to do a weekly program as much as possible. And we're going to start off start working towards our 101 series of shows, which is basically we're going to bring guys that I trust, guys that have been around for a long time, and we're going to talk about topics on a college level 101 kind of introduction. And it's going to be for all of you out there who are new to the whole idea of the alien deception or the occult or things like that. Our goal is to give you a starting point, a base, and allow you to work from there. And so we've got an amazing lineup. For the 101 series, I have William Ramsey coming on and Jim Wilhelmsen. Richard Shaw is lined up to come on and talk about the Tor codes. And we also have Ali Sayadatin. I hope I got that name right. I apologize if I didn't. But he's going to come on and talk about his movie that they've just recently done. I think in here within the last year. He's also going to talk about the new movie that they have coming up as well. I think just maybe give you a hint on that. So that is just a taste of the guests that we have lined up. I'm working very hard to get a very solid group of guests that we can all learn from. We're going to try to take things from a different point of view than what they've done in other programs as much as possible. But what my goal is, and always has been with Fringe Files, is to give you guys some place to start. A lot of you who are new to the whole idea of the fringe Christian world or anything like that, I want you to have something that you can start and then move from there. There's so many great programs out there that cover the kind of topics we're going to cover, but some of them are on a much deeper level. And so we want to give you that base. We want to give you that starting point. And basically, it's going to be like an archive. It's going to be there forever, where people can go back and check it out and reference. And that's going to be the goal with this. So I'm really excited. It's been a long time since to build up to where we're at now. I mean, obviously, we've only done 7 of the Fringe Files in a year, but that is going to change. I'm to the point, guys, where I'm recording every night. I'm recording Cast 'em Off Radio. I'm recording the Forged Through Faith program. I'm going to be recording Cast 'em Off Radio Fringe Files. And then I'm also doing producing for some other shows on the Fringe Radio Network. For those of you who don't know, right now, Johnny from The Iron Show and myself have purchased the Fringe Radio Network. And we're working very hard to build up the roster, to build up the quality, to just bring in some amazing talent, to up the quality of everybody and to start offering video content, really bringing it to the cutting edge as much as we can. And so if you are not subscribed to the Fringe Radio Network YouTube page, get subscribed. Just go to YouTube and type in Fringe Radio Network, and please subscribe to that page. The same goes for the Cast 'em Off Radio YouTube page. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube page yet, please do that, because pretty much all of our shows that come out now are on video, including this one. If you're listening to this on iTunes or Google Play and you want to watch the actual episode, guys, go over to YouTube and go to castemoffradio.com or Cast 'em Off Radio. Type in Cast 'em Off Ministries on YouTube, and you will find the program. You can watch Forged Through Faith on there. You can watch Cast 'em Off Radio. You can watch this show, and then you can also go to the Fringe Radio Network and watch all the same shows. All of our shows are on that network, as well as Spiritual Encounters with Casper McLeod is now
straight
in
off
video.
the bat links.
And many of the other shows are going to be moving in that direction. We're working very hard into the video platform, because that really honestly is the future. So I'm excited, guys. If you're looking at this on video, you see my eyes are all red and messed up. I've been mowing the last 2 days in 20-mile-an-hour.
And Diane, did you see Lisa Marie Presley had a heart attack and they had to give her CPR to bring her back? Look at all these people dying of heart attacks. We were so right not to take that vaccination.
Winds, and so it's just been a constant barrage of dust and dirt and nasty stuff in my eyes, and it's tearing me up pretty bad. Excuse me, I had to get a swig of coffee. It's a little bit late. It's Friday night, and I'm wiped out. I'm trying to adjust to this new schedule, and it's been pretty cool. I love recording, and now that it's fall or moving into winter, I'll have a lot more time to do what I love to do, which is to produce content.
Man, it's gone glary again.
Dig into the Word of God and get quality programming out there. One thing that Fringe Files is always going to be about is staying God-centered. Okay, there's a lot of shows out there that do paranormal, fringe Christian, stuff like that, but we will always stay God-centered on this show. And I'm also not going to bring on anything that I don't believe in. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to promote ideas that I think are false. I'm not going to just be, I'm just not going to do it. There's a lot of programs that don't mind bringing people on just for the sake of exploring ideas. That's not this show. I am not going to bring anything on that I think is dangerous to a new Christian, or that I think is dangerous to an old Christian. I think there's a lot of things that have infiltrated our fringe community that are very dangerous. I think they're psyops. I think they're purposely put in there. I'm not going to name them, but I'm pretty sure you can probably figure that out for yourself, considering the things I've talked about in the past, probably. So anyway, guys, big things coming. I'm excited. We are really going to start moving Fringe Files into the right direction. It's really going to become a big thing. And so be looking for that. Tonight on this show, I'm joined, I think this is the 4th time, by Gary Wayne. Gary Wayne is an author. He's a lecturer. He's a researcher. He's an amazing guy. I love when Gary comes on the show. I love all our guests. But Gary's been on here a lot. And the cool thing about when Gary comes on is, Gary can go on any show, and on every show talk about a different subject. He wrote the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And it's amazing book, Genesis6conspiracy.com. Go check it out. Get a copy if you don't have it. It's a great reference material. I would hold my copy up, but my son has it at school. And he's 14. It is the kind of book that anybody can pick up and read and get something out of. And I don't pump things for the sake of pumping things. I truly think that the Genesis 6 Conspiracy is a book that everybody needs in their research library. It's that important. It has 30 years of research, guys. 30 years of research is what it took to make this book. And Gary Wayne is one of those guys that he can carry the show. He literally has so much information that I don't have to ask a lot of questions, because he's so good at just laying it all out there. And so tonight we're talking about the Essenes. I'm going to be honest, coming into this program, I didn't know a lot about them. And I sure as heck didn't know that they were the root of many of the secret societies that we have today. Just a very fascinating conversation. And Gary believes that they go all the way back to the antediluvian pre-flood time. And so, just like I said, fascinating conversation. You guys are really going to enjoy the interview. So just stay tuned. The interview with Gary Wayne is up next. Joining me tonight is author, researcher, and lecturer, Mr. Gary Wayne, the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Gary, welcome back to the show.
So happy to be back, and so happy to be talking about the subject we're going to discuss tonight, because I think it is one of those key connect the dot organizations and religion that people know so little about, and yet also affects us in ways that people hadn't really thought of. And people are probably very much unaware of who these people are, even though they're starting to read a lot of their works and their documents.
Excellent. Yeah, I am. I'm actually very excited for tonight because I do not know a lot of information about the group we're talking about, and that group is going to be, if I can get my stuff to work right.
Yeah, and we were just talking about that.
That group is going to be the Essenes. The little that I do know is that they are an ancient Jewish sect that is very much involved, interwoven throughout your book and throughout what you talk about, and very much a part of it, and especially in chapters 83 and 84 of your book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, which if you do not have it, you need to get it. Before we get going, though, I want people to understand where they can find your book. They can go to Amazon. They can go to Barnes & Noble, Genesis6conspiracy.com. You can actually get a signed copy from Gary himself. I actually have one, and I feel pretty special about it. And you can also go to find Gary, Facebook and Twitter. Normally I would sit there and I would hold Gary's book and I would hold it up and I would say, see, this is the book that you need to go get. Well, I was looking for the book before the interview and come to find out that my son is actually reading the Genesis 6 Conspiracy and has it at school. He's 14. So that just goes to show you it doesn't matter what age you are. This is a book that all age groups can understand, and you will get something out of it, everybody. No matter if you're the lay person to the doctor, you will get something out of it. So let's get into it tonight, Gary. Like I said, it's chapters 83 and 84 in the book. If people want to pull their Genesis 6 Conspiracy out, pull up those chapters and follow kind of along and loosely follow. But who were the Essenes, and why are they so significant in history?
Yeah, and they really do come in at the crossroads of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy at the time of Jesus and before. And most people, I think some of them have heard of the Essenes, but they don't really understand where they position themselves in Judaic society at the time of Jesus. And so in the Bible, we hear a lot being discussed about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And those were two of the three religious groups of Judaic society of that time. And so the Essenes, though, aren't mentioned by name, although maybe a little bit later on I'll talk about a couple of references to the Essenes that Paul and Jesus are likely talking about the Essenes. But the Essenes were a rogue cult of Judaic society. Even though they had priests that were on the elder council in the temple in Jerusalem, they were not a monotheistic organization. And it's really important to understand this, because they are the key to the secret societies as we know them today. And they're also the key to the writings that people are starting to get more and more immersed into. And the writings that I'm talking about come out of the Qumran community in the Dead Sea. So when we're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, or we're talking about Gnostic Gospels, whether it's the Gnostic Gospel of Mary Magdalene or of Judas, or any of these other parallel Gospels written at a similar time of the Gospels of Christianity, understand these are from a polytheist perspective.
So this is a very, very important group, because the Dead Sea Scrolls is one of the biggest finds in Christian history, but it also brought in a lot of extracurricular activity into what we do, especially into our fringe community here. There's a lot of people who have read into some of these extra canonical books and have gone another direction. And so, yeah, I can see where this group would play a very important part in history, especially in the church.
Yeah, because they wrote a parallel gospel that does not raise Jesus to deity status.
Mm-hmm.
They recognize and draft Jesus as part of their movement, and the prophet and enlightened, and maybe even as the teacher of righteousness, as a lot of the Qumran writings will say, just as they draft James and John the Baptist as being an Essene as well, but they have a different concept of who Jesus and John the Baptist and James were and what they did. And so when we see these other gospels that are being raised up to, most people will first bring them out and say, well, it tells us more about that period, perhaps. But what it tells us about is this rival group that were persecuted into submission and underground by Roman Catholicism when that took form, 300 years later at the implementation and conversion of Constantine, who also plays a bit of a part in their later history as well. So it's very, very important to understand that who these people were, not just the allegations that I'm making as to who they were, but, let's, fully to discuss them tonight, describe who they are, and also how they connect into the secret societies, because that is such a key part as to how the end time will come about and all the different sort of organizations going on and working in this world today that are really trying to bring about world government and universal religion.
Sure. And, we're seeing some very interesting things right now, especially with the latest election here in the States. It seems like the world is pushing back against this new world order machine. How long it's going to last, I don't know. I mean, I really feel like, in my opinion, that this was a reprieve. This is God saying, here's your chance. What are you going to do with it? And that's going to be us getting on our knees and repenting and turning away from the things that we've done for 30, 40, 50 years. But that doesn't mean they're ever going to stop. And so they haven't stopped. They haven't stopped yet. What makes us think that they're going to stop now? We know that the end is going to end the way it says it's going to. It's just a matter of when does that happen.
And who's involved in bringing it about.
Hey, Jay, good to see you, mate.
Which they do.
Sure.
They want that rendezvous with destiny, which, again, most people don't understand. And so, there's two main sort of figures that get written about in a lot of the Qumran documents, and one being the leader of the group, which was obviously a number of different people. And that would be known as the teacher of righteousness. And the teacher of righteousness has a very significant allegorical relationship to their name and their group. But the other one is the evil liar. And certainly from the birth of Jesus to the time of the fall of the Jerusalem temple, and then perhaps as long as the numbers and the persecution was permitting, they looked at the evil liar as Paul.
Really?
The Saul of Tarsus, yes. And so when you hear them talking about the evil liar, that's who they are referencing.
Muslims think that as well.
They look at what
Paul's an Antichrist.
They call Paul's sect was the rogue sect of Christianity, whereas the Essene movement was the mainstream movement of Christianity. And the Paul sect, it took over as, after the Jerusalem church came apart because of the Roman war and the destruction of Jerusalem and the diaspora. And the Paul represents the Gentile church to what the Essenes believe, which are a Judaic group, and took over the church with Gentile doctrines and policies and raised Jesus to a deity status, which they say, which is incorrect because, you can look through the four Gospels and those were part of the Jerusalem church and the early books of the Acts. But they say that at that time, Jesus was considered to be the Son of God. That only happened with Paul's writing and as they usurped the church. So that's the perspective. But these two groups grew up.
Hang on, I know who you mean. Hang on, Jay. Hope for Our Times. The channel was Hope for Our Times. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the channel was Hope for Our Times.
And were active at the same period of time. And they were rivals in supremacy.
Tom Hughes, no, I think it was Mike from Around the World, the battle plan. Are you talking about that, Jay?
Of this burgeoning
Or the
religion
Tom Hughes one?
coming out of the Middle East. And of course, with Constantine, the Essenes were, moved to a dominant position, and that's when all of the Gnostic groups were persecuted into underground activity and to hide themselves, whether it's in the church or in other parts of the world.
She died. Wow,
So
there you
moving on
go.
to talk a little bit about more who they were. I just wanted to get some of that stuff out because
Sure.
people will read these references and they won't quite make those connections.
Well, and just real quick. Now, you said that they believe that Paul was a liar, correct? That is interesting because we're seeing this creep in some areas of the fringe community, where there are people who are now there's a guy with a very, very prominent show that has a lot of listeners that says that Paul was a liar, he was a fraud, everything he says is fake and wrong, and so we're seeing a resurgence even in our time of that kind of thinking.
Let me have a
they call
look.
it Pauline Christianity, and they're going to have to destroy Pauline Christianity to bring about the end time so that they can move Jesus back to prophet status like a Muhammad or like a Zoroaster or like a Buddha or Hermes and all the other patriarchs of this sort of global Gnostic religion that they're trying to implement. That's the new Babel in the end time.
Okay, well, I guess, let us know where did this all begin and how did it just move through time?
Yep.
Yeah, so they draft Jesus and...
Okay, Jay, I just went and looked at the last video on yesterday's stream, and it is Tom Hughes, Hope for Our Times. It had the beautiful scenery on it. So there you go.
To the disciples and all of the Jerusalem church to being a scene, including James, the brother, who was the first bishop of Jerusalem, actually the second bishop, but the one who's the real pillar of the early Jerusalem church. And so who they are is we turn to, let's say, Josephus, who's a very, very good source for these themes because he lived at that time and he was also part of the Essene community. Even though he comes out of the Pharisee sect, he actually went to live with them as he checked out the Sadducees because he wanted to see all the varieties of the religious sects of Judaism. So he tells us that they were part of an ancient group that goes back into prehistory, and that they preserved knowledge from the ancients that we would know. And if anybody has listened to any of my shows, would be that antediluvian knowledge and the knowledge of Egypt.
Oh, no way.
And that they were a white robe cult. So white robe is a very significant dress wear that they wore, and as are related groups before them and after them. And that they were also a mystical cult of a secret society complete with initiation. So they were a mystical religion. They were a polytheist religion, as opposed to worshiping God as the supreme God. They would worship him as just one other god of many gods. So the pantheon.
Did they have anything to do with Kabbalah, with the infusion of Kabbalah?
Absolutely, they were. And when you get into writings like Gardner, these themes were actually Kabbalists. They're part of that. And a number of other groups that are either over time been misrepresented or taken over, or splinter groups that people might be familiar with. And sticking with Josephus just for a second, he also recorded them as worshiping fallen angels. And they would not give up the names of these angels that they worshiped even unto death. And again, you can go to the Unger's Bible Dictionary as well, or Nelson's Bible Dictionary, look up scenes, and it'll basically say the same thing that I'm saying here that Josephus documented. But I like Josephus because he lived at that time, even at the time of the fall of Jerusalem, participated in the war, and then documented all of Jewish history for the Romans so that it wouldn't be lost to history. And they were also very heavily developing in the area of medicine, which again sort of links them back to Heliopolis in a different way. And they were very much an ascetic group and a monastic group. So they were the first ones to set up private places of worship for their polytheist religion, with special temples outside of Jerusalem, and that's why Quran, or the Qumran area, the Dead Sea area, was where they had these special places of worship that was distinctly different that went on in the temple, of course. And that they tend to be celibate, and they also had harsh rules for what they would do for their food. And they actually had a manual of discipline, I think as the name was called.
Yeah, Hannah, I think he does a prophecy update every day, Tom Hughes. I think he does one every day.
All that was this whole list of rules and regulations that they had to live by, including humility, but humility in such large ways that it's almost hubris in its approach. And if this reminds you a lot of the Jesuits, well, it should, because it's a related sort of group, which again comes, 1,500 years later, but very much part of the same sort of group.
Well, if these guys had that knowledge, if they brought that knowledge with them through the antediluvian times to, our times, you have to imagine that they were probably one of the root groups, right? That spread all these other ideas around.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. And so when we talk about the Essenes, these were who they looked at as their greatest patriarch was Enoch, but not Enoch, son of Jared of the Sethians, Enoch, son of Cain.
Oh, okay.
And that's their greatest patriarch. And Moses is the second patriarch, but not in the Moses as we would understand Moses from how we understand how Christianity came out of Judaism. I'll come back to that just in a second, but sticking with Enoch for a second. Of course, Enoch worked with the fallen angels, so direct relationship there, makes perfect sense. And their greatest scripture that they cherished was the Book of Jubilees, written by Enoch, but now, as you understand it, written by Enoch, son of Cain. So when we look at some of these other books coming out of the Qumran area that are talking about Enoch, we have to be very, very careful when they talk about the Book of Giants or the Secrets of Enoch, as opposed to the first book of Enoch, which essentially runs a monotheistic course. But read those books for context, but be very, very careful of them. And the Essenes also cherished the serpent and the dragon and seraphim images, which were the watchers and the fallen angels of prehistory. And moving forward to Moses, their second greatest patriarch, is as they look at what happened with the Sadducees and the Pharisees as actually being the rogue cult. They actually believed that Moses, who was educated at Heliopolis, was a polytheist, and that at some point in time after the Exodus, even though Moses brings the wisdom and the knowledge of Egypt and the sacred sciences, the rogue monotheist religion takes over, moving the polytheist true religion, as they call it, the alleged true religion, as the Essenes call it, off to more of the side, even though they still had Aaronite priests, right? And again, they believe that because they had priests and elders on the Jerusalem council that descended down from Aaron, they believe that they had the true religion that comes from Heliopolis as well.
So,
and then if you go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, do you think that, the golden calf incident, was that propagated by the Essenes? Do you believe that they were usurping at that time, trying to take that back, or is that a different group?
No, I think that's just
the Egyptian culture
Israelites
infused.
who were raised for 400 years under polytheism into a nation, right? And that's the cult of the bull. And I'll touch on the cult of the bull as it deals with the Essenes, but I think that develops later.
Just kind of an infusion of culture, since they were in Israel or in Egypt for so long, they just picked up those customs. Okay.
Yes, and as this polytheist group develops, I mean, and I'll come back to this as well. You now learn why the bull cult of Molech and Baal were so easily accepted by so many, because you have this third rogue group that's going on there, right? Okay, and so they also did not follow the lunar calendar like the monotheists did. They followed the solar calendar because they were sun worshippers. Okay. So these are a completely different group than the monotheist tradition. And so they believe that they have the true religion that goes back to Heliopolis that Aaron and Moses brought back with them. So they draft them as polytheists, right? Okay, so this is very, very important to do because they'll draft all the major people of Judaism, whether it's David or Solomon or it's Jesus or it's James or it's John the Baptist, because that's what they do. And they pull everything into this worldwide Gnostic polytheist religion in a deceptive manner because, I mean, polytheism and monotheism are at odds with each other, right? It's the fallen angels against the true God. And so some of the other groups that were around at the time of Jesus that these Essenes were part of that people may have heard of or may not be, but the most deceptive one is Nazarene. And most people look at that word Nazarene as being Jesus of Nazareth. Well, that's not what it means at all. Nazarene is an Essene ideology and an Essene sect. And this is the Nazarenes that then draft Jesus of Nazareth as part of that same sort of rogue group. Not that Jesus was, but they just draft them accordingly. And Nazarene actually comes not from Nazareth, it comes from Nazar, which is Natzar. And what that means is, and without coincidence, because everything in occultism has a meaning to their names and their titles, that you just need to understand what they're talking about. It translates actually as guardians and watchers. Right back to the watchers. And guardians and watchers of this ancient science and knowledge, or the seven sacred sciences, developed and perverted by Enoch the Evil.
So they see themselves as the ones who are overseeing this ancient knowledge that will carry it through the ages, basically.
Yes, that's certainly at that point in time, and certainly there's a relationship there as it moves through time. And so, just so that people understand that, if you go back to Masonic history, they also draft Enoch as one of the great patriarchs, and Lamech and Tubal-Cain and Nama, all the descendants of Cain, even though there's some names that are identical in the Septium line. This is the Cain line that they're talking about. And it's out of this mystical sun-worshiping religion that Enoch develops, right, that becomes this religion of the Nephilim and of Egypt and of the whole Middle East and pretty much the whole polytheist world, because it's the same religion, right?
Yeah.
This is the religion that the Essenes are taking themselves back to. And out of this mystical religion at that time, also Masonic history comes out of, and their secret societies are developed out of this mystical religion. So again, we have this connection to the Essenes, as I said, not only back into prehistory, but all the way through to today.
So they're terribly
still there in the background.
Yeah, they're terribly important when it comes to secret societies, because they basically are the root, like we've talked about. I mean, they really are the ones who set the groundwork for the Masons and all these other groups that would carry forward. And you got, it's like they're basically not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're spreading it all around through all these groups and trickling it through, so that if one gets shut down, there's two or three other ones that can carry the tradition along. And it's actually pretty brilliant if you think about it, on a very diabolical and nefarious way. But
yeah, it is. And I will, as the show progresses a little bit later on, I'll connect who they are and what groups they're part of throughout the last 2,000 years, and their connections and how Freemasonry views them today and part of their history.
Awesome.
And so I'll provide some insights on that. So Nazarene is one of these groups, because there's several sects of these Gnostics that are moving around at the time of Jesus, before and afterwards. And Nazarene is one of the significant ones, as were the Kabbalists, because this is the polytheist group of Essenes. So anything to do with Kabbalism coming out of Judea of that time and later is again rooted in this Essene religion, maybe a sister sect, but still part of that overall Essene polytheist religion. And so we also have the Mandaeans, which are also known as Sabians. And Sabians whether or not you're talking the Quran or dig them up as more of an ancient religion. They're part of this mix in here that's mixed into Judaism as well. And they're a splinter sect of John the Baptist, but they draft John the Baptist as well as being an Essene. And so now we have the Mandaeans, who are sun worshippers and followers, a rogue sect of John the Baptist, just as the Joanites are. They are also an Essene group that is Gnostic as well, and they're part of this whole sort of group.
Interesting.
And then we also have a very interesting character that people might recognize called Simon the Magus.
Yes, yes.
And he is mentioned in the Bible for particular reasons, because he not only is trying to buy in the Bible the Holy Spirit from Peter, and trying to bring in Christianity under that one religion to control that and the power of the Holy Spirit. He's also considered an Antichrist figure. But he's also in this tradition the successor to John the Baptist. And he is educated in Alexandria and is initiated into the mysteries with the Basilidians, which is a significant group that comes together again with Freemasonry a little bit later as being sort of the basis of the philosophy for Freemasonry, and then part of another group that reforms, hundreds and hundreds of years later. Did you have a question there, Brandon?
No, I'm actually messing with the audio here.
Okay.
Something got messed up.
I just thought you might be trying to get in there, and I was carrying on a little bit too much. So.
No, you're actually doing me a favor. I'm trying to get you dialed in where we need to be. And I'm just, whenever you're on, Gary, I am just sitting here listening and soaking up what you're saying, because I learn a lot, and you do a really good job of bringing all these, all the topics that you're talking about and laying them out, and then at the end it all comes together. And so I'm just, I'm kind of in awe at how these groups have just maintained through time. I mean, yes, Christianity, we obviously maintain through time, but they've done it side by side.
Guys, out of all the books you get from people like Paul Begley and Tom Horn and Steve Quayle and Jonathan Kahn, they're not as good as Gary Wayne's Genesis 6 Conspiracy. It's an absolutely stunning book, and it's, brilliantly done.
With us, and much of the same way. I mean, look at all the denominations we split off into, and they've really done the same thing. They've split off into all these different denominations of the same Gnostic ideology. And so it's just fascinating to me how all this works, and kind of scary at the same time, because they're everywhere. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and as we mix in one more group of this polytheist area coming up, and again, they have documents as well, and it's a scene document, so people need to understand it. It's called the Coveters of Damascus, and so there's a very interesting sort of scripture that, again, that's out there. It's called the Document of Damascus, and talks about giants and things like that. But understand, read it for context, but understand it's a polytheist doctrine. Okay, so all of these were all part of the Essene sort of rogue group that people don't seem to recognize were a very, very important group of Judaism at the time.
No,
and we don't even in the Bible get a lot of references to them, right?
Honestly, before we even did this show, I had not honestly really heard anything about them, Gary. I've heard about all these other groups that have spawned off of this group, but I'd never really, the name was somewhat familiar, probably because of a couple biblical passages, but I knew nothing about the group, and so that's why I was looking forward to tonight's show.
Okay, so if you want to read, and again, you have to read it with understanding who they are, what they did, what they believed in.
What they believe, yeah.
So the first reference is in Ezekiel, if you want to believe that. So that shows you how old this is, and this is the time of the second temple, or is it the first temple? No, it's the first temple, because they're going to be dispersed. I might have that backwards, but anyways, at the time of Ezekiel. So before the time of Jesus, 500, 600, 700 years. So in Ezekiel 8, it talks about the idolatry that's going on in the worshiping of the temple. And so, yeah, this is the destruction of the first temple just before there. And that'll be done by the Babylonians. So they give everybody a frame of reference. And he talks about the most horrible things that are going on. They're detestable, almost abominations going on. What he's talking about are, first thing is going to, not only are the elders worshiping idols and doing horrible things in private, which again is probably the Essenes, but now he connects it that exactly who they're talking about. And even though there may have been Pharisees and Sadducees doing the same, this is the Essene worship, right? And he talks about the women in the temple mourning for Tammuz. Tammuz is the god of Mesopotamia, right? And is like Osiris or Baal is the equivalent, right? So they're mourning for Tammuz at the temple. And then he walks into the inner temple, and he's taken in there, and there's 25 men worshiping the sun facing the east, and their backs to the temple. These are the Essenes that they're talking about. So people think that they're just a group that might have been around just at the time of Jesus. They go back into prehistory, and if you believe what they believe, that all the way back to Solomon and all the way back to Moses, and then always obviously somehow connected back to the Enochian mysticism developed in the antediluvian epoch. Now, in the New Testament, the first time you might get a hint of them, and I know a lot of people say this is a direct reference, this is possible or not, but I'll raise it because a lot of people like to think it comes from a questioning aspect, even though it's raised by the Pharisees about probably this rogue sect. So in Matthew 19:11, it talks about Jesus being questioned about marriage and divorce. And Jesus goes on talking about celibacy and non-celibacy. And of course, it's the celibacy aspect that was only done at the Essene cult, not necessarily in the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So probably a reference to there, and that they didn't marry and had very, very strict diets, and they were ascetic. Is what I talked about. But if we get further into the New Testament, in First Timothy, we get a very interesting reference, which is, to me, can only be the Essenes, and that's First Timothy 1, I think verse 3, and it talks about warning of people of not to pay attention and go with the doctrines of certain men who teach false doctrines and devote themselves to endless genealogies, and that they promote themselves to controversies and the doctrines of humans rather than God's work, which is done through faith. So the key here is the seven sciences, promoting controversies and a pantheon of gods and endless genealogies, because, and as my book says over and over and over, genealogies are tracked all the way from Nephilim and fallen angels right through to the end time and connected to the Antichrist. So these endless genealogies is just the key thing that can only be the Essenes that are being talked about, because they're part of this belief system and organization.
And see, that never really made a whole lot of sense to me before. And what I've read in your book, and just the fact that the elite are always tracking themselves back and trying to maintain their bloodlines, and they're constantly working on their genealogy, making sure that everything is the way it should be. So it's kind of cool how when you, and you have to be careful, I know, but when you look at what the other side believes, and then you read the Bible in the context of what was happening at the time and what belief systems were going on, it really makes a lot more sense when you can put the whole framework together, you know. It's just pretty interesting.
Masons, because they use the Bible as well, they use the base Bible, and they actually in their writings say that they actually were the main proponents of getting the King James Bible written, but that's a different rabbit hole to go down, and that they have an extended Bible. So when they get to that verse that I quoted in Timothy, is they don't translate that as doctrines, as false doctrines. They translate that as quote unquote, and Pike actually calls it false gnosis. That there are accurate teaching of gnosis and inaccurate. So they manipulate that. And gnosis, of course, is the root for Gnostic religions, which is what these teams were part of, right? And gnosis is the word for knowledge. That's where it comes from, right? To arrive at that. So when they look at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that knowledge is what they really focus on there. That's the tree of gnosis as they understand it in the Gnostic religion, tree of knowledge. Right, and then also just so that people understand that I'm not making this up, that there is enough biblical evidence to go along with this. Go to Colossians 2, in verse 8, 16, and 20, because it can only be talking about the Essenes. And in verse 8, it talks about not being taken captive by deceptive and hollow philosophy. Right, philosophy comes out of the 7 sacred sciences. Absolutely key. Just as philosophy is a key part of the Jesuits, it's part of the same group, because they study the 7 sacred sciences and promote it as well. And this philosophy that depends again on human traditions and principles of this world. Again, that's the sciences and Gnosticism. And then in verse 16, it moves on to talk about don't let people judge you and deceive you on what you can eat and what you can drink, on the false humility that's overdone, again, very much similar to Jesus, or the worship of angels, right? This is key core stuff. And in verse 20, it instructs not to submit to their false rules of this world. And again, what's part of any religion that goes wrong, typically polytheism, may have human-made doctrine, but when it creeps into monotheism, whether it was the Targum, in Judaism at that time, or man-made doctrine that creeps into the Catholicism that comes along later. This is the same type of ideology because it's the same sort of deception. And I'm not saying that all Catholicism is wrong. Just it's this virus from this polytheism that has human doctrines being superimposed over God's doctrine, which you have to be very, very careful of. And so typically those come from the oral traditions, right? And that these rules have an appearance of wisdom or holiness, right? But they're really hollow underneath because it doesn't come from God. It comes from humans. It's human doctrine, right? And it's a self-imposed rules of self-imposed worship, as opposed to worshiping in a manner that's in the spirit of God and by the laws of God.
Boy, do we have some of that nowadays, huh?
Do we ever? Yeah. And the harsh treatment of the body. So again, you get that image of the Jesuits looking back and forth, of that false sense of humility. And they've seen this as well. And that they tend to also, and I think this goes maybe to their rituals of sexual nature, of where they have an indulgence of, sensual indulgence, overindulgence. So I think when we link all of that together, they can only be talking about the Essenes, because it's this polytheism that can only come from the Essene groups and the Kabbalists of that time.
Yeah, that's it's always interesting to hear more about how it all ties together. A lot of what Dr. Heiser does too. I don't know if you've listened or read any of his work, but it's always interesting because he's always talking about how we need to look at everything in the Bible in the proper context of the time and everything else, and it makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting how you parallel that to now, and it all still applies because the same thing is happening. The same man-made ideas, and so you really got to wonder, how much infiltration have we really had into mainstream Christianity?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it has. I mean, anytime you have allegorical interpretation or anything that's being talked about the inaccuracy of the Bible, then that is the Gnostic virus that's has come into Christianity. I mean, you can see obvious iconology that goes sideways, but it's easy to get people to believe that not everything in the Bible is true, which is a common statement these days, and that you have to interpret so many things allegorically. And everything that is in Freemasonry or polytheism or the Essene cult and religion, everything is interpreted allegorically, and you have to be initiated into the mysteries to understand what the true meaning is. Right?
Yeah.
So anytime you hear that, then of an allegorical interpretation, understand that's the Gnostics getting inside of Christianity to bring it down and redefine it for the end time. They have to bring Jesus back to deity status. And in that sort of understanding, they really like to say something that most people don't pick up on, where they talk about Jonah and being taken into the belly of the fish for 3 days and down into the abyss of the earth, and then somehow being spit out and surviving. They say, well, there's no way that that can be true, right? And so that's just an allegorical story. And most people will nod their heads, well, maybe it is, and then, maybe it's just a lesson that's in there. But it's not. Because our Messiah, our Redeemer, says the only sign to the wicked generation that he visited would be the sign of Jonah.
Yeah.
So if that's allegorical, then his resurrection is allegorical.
Yeah, well, just the very notion that God can't keep a man alive inside a whale is ridiculous. If you don't believe that your God can keep a man alive inside a whale, then what's the point of even believing in God in the first place? I mean, if he has no power, why are you even wasting your time?
Right.
Really,
so
let's look at it.
In the church where you have people arguing from a human capability or a human doctrine or a human tradition.
Yes. Yeah.
That's polytheism, right? And they override that from an understanding and what we can do to what God can do, which is, an abomination in the statement. So, God can do anything. He can.
Yeah.
So why would that be impossible for him to do?
Wow, that's that's quite an indictment, man. If you think about it, I think Christians have to really think about that. I mean, why are we putting limits on God? Why are we thinking that he has to conform to our thoughts and our ideas? But that's very much the way that Christianity has gone in modern times. Yep. Wow, that really gives you something to think about. It's
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit of echo. I don't know whether you're picking it up on your end.
I can fix that for you. There you go. Is that better?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's gone now. I just don't want it echoing on the.
It's very, very touchy. All I have to do is move something just a little bit, and it changes everything. So,
yeah.
Well, Gary, we've got about.
No, I've still got a bit of an echo. Sorry.
Oh, do you? Okay, we'll fix that. And there we go. Let's see if that will fix it. Only when you're talking?
Yeah, only when I'm talking.
Is that better? Okay. Good. We've got about, let's take about 10, 15 more minutes. Go ahead and just kind of bring it all home. Before that, though, can you give everybody kind of a rundown of the books out of the Dead Sea Scrolls that they really need to be careful with? Because I know a lot of people like to dive in, but you're right. There is a lot of stuff in there that you really have to be prayed up and make sure that you're treating with kid gloves. Is that correct?
Yep. All of them.
Okay. Well, that's easy. Okay.
All of them.
Good.
Because whether or not it's the Gospel of Judas or Enochian books or any of the other ones coming out, it is all polytheist based in its writing. So fine, read them, get a better idea, but make sure you put it into context that it's polytheism. And there's going to be leading you astray in certain areas. So wherever it strays from what the Bible says, that's when you know that you need to get the red flags up. So
you better have your Bible next to you while you're going through this and double checking. Okay.
Yeah. So now the Essenes, as we approach after Jesus is crucified and is raised to heaven, and as we approach 70 AD during the rebellion, the Essenes are the only ones that are left as part of the priests in the temple.
Guys, I'll just say this. The Essenes weren't known until they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Is that correct? Did we know about the Essenes before the Dead Sea Scrolls? I don't think we did.
At its destruction.
Okay.
Okay, they're in control of the church or the temple at that time.
And is that why all this nasty stuff is going on in the temple? I mean, you had prostitution, you had just all this deplorable thing. Detestable is what God called it.
Yeah, I think that was a combination of all of the three sects that were doing that, and that was going on at the time of Jesus. And so this is more or less in the last, say, 4 or 5 years that everybody's fleeing Jerusalem because the armies come there and they're wiping the Judeans out and they're dispersing them to the rest of the world, and they're going to completely destroy Jerusalem, just as Jesus said that they would. And so they hide documents and treasures, and they're the ones who knew where all of these treasures were hidden. And so when we get down to the Templars down the road, they knew where to dig. Okay? And I'll connect that in a few minutes. And so after the fall of Jerusalem, the Essenes, they flee for the most part to Spain and to southern France and all throughout Europe, but mostly in the area of southwest France and northwest Spain do they settle into. And they start and they become the princes of Europe, the nobility, the noble families in running kingdoms. And they take on a title called not only the Essenes, they sort of morph into European families of a very important name, but they're also like to call themselves Rex Du, or the kings of God. They like to call themselves the princes of Jerusalem. And they're also known as the sons of Zadok, which I will come back to as I loop around. I'm going to need more than 10 minutes here, so we're going to run a little bit longer.
Oh, that's fine, Garrett. Yeah, take your time. We're fine.
Okay. And so in Europe, they're developing into these royal families and very powerful families and very rich families, and again, tracking their genealogies. And also, they, as I said, they drafted the family of Jesus that they call the Essenes, and these are the family of Jesus, not Jesus' descendants in reality, but the family, although they do believe that Jesus married Mary Magdalene, had children, and is part of the Essenes.
Sure.
That's their belief system, not mine. And so when Christianity converges with...
Yeah, that one, there's the belief that Mary Magdalene married Christ and they had children. We all know about that theory. But come on, if Christ had sex, it would completely do away his mission. If he lusted after Mary Magdalene, it will completely undo his mission. It's just so completely untrue.
Constantine makes it the religion of the empire, and homogenizes it with the polytheism that everybody knows is in there. There is a new group that's formed as celebration of this, and this is the Order of Constantine and the Order of the Red Cross. And this is an order that I'm going to come back to as I wrap this up, that goes back into the Essenes and back to the two temples. But they're reformed called the Order of the Red Cross. Now, as we move forward,
okay, Phil, God bless, mate.
Jump,
thanks for dropping in.
Years to 10.
Phil, you're going back to work next week, aren't you? You just had a week off.
90. There's an interesting fellow that comes along, and his name is Godfrey de Bouillon. And if that name is not familiar to most people, he is one of the founders of the Knight Templar.
Okay.
And he is a descendant of Dagobert. And Dagobert is a Merovingian king, last survivor. The Merovingian king has, as we covered off in the King Arthur interview that we did, not only the bloodlines of David, but the bloodlines of King Saul, the bloodlines of Nephilim, and they also believe that the bloodlines of Jesus and Mary Magdalene that descends through the son of Mary Magdalene and Jesus, which is named Josephus, and that crosses over from the Camelot dynasties with Aragon to Amenabad into the Merovingian bloodline. Okay, so that's why I had to bring up that other sort of apostasy a little bit earlier about them believing Jesus didn't die on the cross and why they believe he was a prophet but not son of God. Okay, so believes that he's a descendant of these people. And he meets with, in 1090, Calabrian monks in Italy. And Calabrian monks are running a Pythagoras mystery school, but under the veil of the Catholic religion. They're just developing the liberal arts, but they're really a Pythagorean mystery school. And what happens is de Bullion meets with them in 1090, and they agree to go to Jerusalem to do excavation in Jerusalem and to start a new order. Okay. Now, these royal families that come out of Europe, they send representatives of this order. So these are not 9, and in 1118 there's 2 more that are added. Not 9 poor monks, these are 9 kings or princes of not only French nobility and some perhaps even into northern France and perhaps even bloodlines that go into the north, but mostly French. And certainly from that generation from the French, right? And so they are sent there, and these are princes that have been initiated and are the highest adepts of an ancient Masonic organization. So they're going to meet up in Jerusalem with the Calabrian monks, and they're going to form together with this ancient Masonic organization to the other organizations, again, of Joanites, the Ormus and Alexandrians and the Basilides of Alexandria, and the Order of Constantine. And the Calabrian monks that go with them, they actually will build with de Bullion an abbey called the Notre Dame Abbey of de Sion, or how would I pronounce it? Our Lady of Sion. They build a temple there that they do the initiation and create this new order. This new order called the Templars is going to hide this other order underneath, and the amalgamation of this coming together of this new order, and they dedicate it to the Order of the Red Cross of Constantine, and they also take on the names of the princes of Jerusalem, and this is the same people of Rex too. This is the same princes of Jerusalem that come out of the Essenes, because the Essenes believe that they have the royal priests and the royal bloodlines of David and Solomon. Okay, this all comes together to create this Order of Sion and the Priory of Sion at the Abbey of Sion. Okay, and if people don't know what Sion means, it is, I'm just going to bring up my notes here on Sion. Sion is, or Sion as the French would pronounce it, or if it's Sion or Sion in Spain, it comes from Latin for Zion. Okay, so when we...
Yeah, Diane, I will say this. The first 2 episodes of season 1 of The Chosen is really boring. It's not very good at all. And I don't like how they portrayed Peter as an informant of the Romans, because that's what they did in it. So when I seen the guy who plays Jesus getting a big cuddle from the Pope, I knew it stunk. So I was very disappointed, but it is what it is.
Talk about the Order of Sion, or the Priory of Sion, it's the Order of Zion. It's this organization that is formed in 1090 and 1099, initiated, and also the same organization that split away from Templars in 1188 at the cutting of the elm, because the Templars have lost
Hi, Sean,
the original
welcome to the channel.
goals, and they become too focused on banking and growing rich. So they split away. And that's why, even though they discredit the Priory of Sion, those Grand Masters only go back to 1188 at the splitting of the elm at Geezers, because that's when they split. And so if you want to know the Grand Masters before 1188, you go back to the Grand Masters of the Knights Templar, because it's the same organization. Okay, so Sion, what does that mean? Well, Sion is this rock ridge and natural protection at Jerusalem that we first encounter with David as he's trying to invade the city of Jerusalem and take it back from the Jebusites. And so that is still there today, and that was called the Rock of Zion, and that's where this temple was built. And of course, that was destroyed in about 1200, but on the Rock of Zion. When Zion later becomes known as the whole city of Jerusalem, and then later it's known as, the millennial city and then the heavenly city as it rolls out through the Bible. But understand what Zion is, because that is so very, very important. Now, they overlay Zion with an allegory, just as in the Holy Grail, where it can mean two different things, and we're talking about San Grail, San Grail, San Grail. They do this again with Zion, only this is Sion or Sion, S-C-I-O-N. And this is, as we know it, in its normal translation, an agricultural grafting or shoot cut specifically for grafting, and in this case, allegorically, bloodline.
Huh.
And the second meaning to it is a descendant of a noble, in this case, Nephilim family, and generally the first generation and the firstborn of that descendant, and or a twig of unknown or hidden origin or bloodline, right? So this becomes a code word for Zion. That's why you hear of Zionists in good ways and bad ways, the conspiracy theories and otherwise, or the ultimate with the elders of Zion. Because this is all part of that entire meaning. And understand that the priory of Sion, priory is just another word for church or monastery, and also understand that the Essenes were part of this group that comes together in 1099, and they were the first monastic group. And then all the other groups that mold into Catholicism, whether it's the Benedictine monks or the Calabrian monks or the Augustine monks or the Chaldean monks or the Cistercians, these are all part of the same group that is operating to form the Knights Templar. And then Saint Bernard comes along, and he writes the letter that is going to ensure the Papal Bull of 1128. Okay, that the Templars are going to have all of this power, and they grow to this huge organization. But there's something that happens that's very important in 1118, because in 1099, even though Godfrey de Bouillon is offered the Prince of Jerusalem, or the King of Jerusalem title there, because of his Benjamite bloodline that's grafted in the Sion, he turns it down and only accepts the title of the Duke of the Holy Sepulchre. But in 1118, Baldwin, who is Godfrey's brother, accepts it as the first King of Jerusalem, and then the next one is the Count of Anjou, which is, of course, the Anjou is part of this bloodline of royal families in France that we're talking about. Okay, and the King of Jerusalem is going to be the title that the Antichrist accepts at the abomination in the temple, right? As his blood inheritance coming through.
I never knew that was going to be the Antichrist's title, King of Jerusalem. Wow.
Same bloodlines. And Saint Bernard, who is the second most powerful person in Roman Catholicism at the time, and nothing is decided until he weighs in. He makes this happen as taking them from the small order to being multinational, like a corporation. Well, who Saint Bernard is he comes out of the Montbard family, again out of France. So he's not this poor monk. And guess who is one of the original Knights Templar, one of these princes of Jerusalem, which is a title they also take in 1118. They fully accept this Princes of Jerusalem title at the initiation of King Baldwin. Is Andre Montbard is one of those knights, and he is the uncle to Saint Bernard. Okay, so this is
wow, this is fascinating. I never knew any of this. I knew the Templars were in Jerusalem around then, but I didn't know the details. Gee, this guy does his research. He's really fascinating.
Connected. Some of the other names that come out of there are the Count of Champagne, who they're big donors of the Cistercians, and where Saint Bernard comes out of that order. And some other names are Henry St. Clair, who's part of the additional two in 1118. And Henry St. Clair is part of the St. Clair family that is part of the Grand Masters of Slipson and the Prior of Sion, and also the family that starts up the modern version of Freemasonry after the fall of the Templars in 1307 in Scotland. Right, and it is considered the first Grand Master of that group and the founder of modern Freemasonry. You also have people like the Folk of Anjou, which is why Anjou becomes the second King of Jerusalem title. You got two of them that are Rosal and Gondomir. They're Cistercian monks, so again, Gnostics. You can understand very quickly here that this was a close-knit group of people that were rich and from the same religion and were not working for the good of Christianity.
And so when the Templars split, they basically went into banking. Are they the ones who basically are the mega bankers of the world, the big families now?
Yeah, they needed to rebuild that because the Templars were the modern banking arm, right? So after the fall of the Templars, you have several organizations that have to rise up. You've got the formation of the Rosicrucians, or the Rose Cross, as they're known, at the splitting of the Elms coming out. And they formed very quickly to start creating some of these other groups and splitting them up because they don't want it all centralized in the Templars anymore.
Sure.
Because they were overthrown all at once. So you have the Rosicrucians being set up first, and then you have other groups like the Freemasons being set up to deal with politics and the military, and then later the media. You have the Jesuits, which are going to replace the Templars inside of the Roman Church, and that's why you see them out in front of the exploration of the New World and controlling and manipulating doctrines. And you have the creation of the Royal Society to take control of education and to take control of the developing the seven sciences, to lead people away from God and to honor the fallen pantheon and to build monuments to them and to discredit God for everything, just like they've done all the way through history.
Sure.
And that's created by Rosicrucians and Freemasons. And coming to your point, they also have to recreate the banking arm, which is the Bauer family, in the 1700s, who changed their names to the Rothschild.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay.
When they set up the London Bank.
Huh.
So yeah, so you can see how this all connects. And then if you take that sort of forward to modern Freemasonry and getting into the Masonic connections, is that I'm going to use some things that come out of Robert Lomas and Albert Mackey and Albert Pike.
So their own writings, their own words.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so they have similarities, the Essenes and their organization, to the Freemasons. Just to quickly sort of cover a quick of them off. You know, you have to be chosen to join the Essene order at the time, just like secret societies. You had to swear an oath. It's a initiatory order. You have to go through various degrees of knowledge. They had secret handshakes to recognize each other. And they both were heavily connected to operative masonry or building things, right? Just as the Freemasons came out of the operative building guild out of the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, Masonic students, they have to learn about the Essenes, right? And their Masonic beginnings, because again, as we talked about with the formation of the Templars, this was combining with the Essenes, this ancient Masonic order, which also had the knowledge come down through Moses and in their belief system, and Solomon, and down to the Essenes. Okay, so how they connect themselves back, other than that, and how it comes together, and also understand that the Gnostics that I was talking about had molded themselves in the Roman Church with the Cistercians, the Augustines, the Chaldeans, and the Benedictines that built all of the churches, whether it's in the Roman Collegia first, the Manichaeans, and the ones in Italy first went to, or later on with in England with Augustine, or later on with the Gothic art coming back from Jerusalem and the knowledge that they found from the Templars, the St. Bernard, and then the Mason and Templar building guilds that built all the great Gothic temples of Europe from that knowledge. Okay, this building aspect is significant to it, just as the Essenes take themselves back to the two buildings of the temple as part of this organization, both the first temple and the second temple. And And the first temple, what happens is this knowledge to build Solomon's temple comes from Tyre, the king of Tyre, from the Dionysian builders, right? And this is also building knowledge that goes down through the Pythagorean mystery schools that ends up in Roman in about 700 BC and the formation of the Roman collegia that the Gnostics roll themselves into in the early first few centuries of the modern era, of the common era. And so they have to import this knowledge that Solomon goes to the king of Tyre with, and they set up these Masonic building guilds, which the Essenes inherit this knowledge from the first temple. And then they reform these other Mason building guilds, these Knight Mason building guilds, the Essenes, as they're also called, to build with Jerubbaal the second temple. And they also believe, and this is also in Masonic writings, that everything I'm talking about comes from Masonic writings, that Jerubbaal was initiated by Darius.
I've got a Masonic village in my area. It's not a village, but it's like a few blocks of houses and that. And the roofs are all, they got the triangle in it for the Masonics. And it's the Masonic temple. It's not Masonic temple, but it's cheap rent that people can rent in this complex, like all these houses and that in this one area. And they are full on Masonic. I was going to spray paint them, but I thought I better not.
The Knight Order of the East and the West, that is also part of the Essene groups that join several of these other groups that I just named, whether it's Knights of the Temple, East and West from Darius and Jerubbaal, the Assyrians, the Knight Masons Order, or the Royal Arch Masons. There's a lot of different names to these orders that came together to build the second temple.
Yeah. I mean, right? Really, this may be oversimplifying, but what we're really talking about here is the entire shadow government of the world. I mean, what we're talking about is our modern day shadow government, where they started. I mean, they started with this group, the Essenes, and I'm sure others, but they now have overtaken basically the entire world, if you want to look at it in a certain way.
Yeah, so if you see you see that conglomeration of the Friar of Sion and the Knights Templar and the Order of Sion and all these other different names that they had. And then there's a splitting away in 1188 of this group away from the Templars that later gets destroyed in 1307. You have the formation of the Rosicrucians coming out. And this is pure blood that the original formation has 66 founders of, which is an interesting number, but they start to set up all of these other groups. So these are pure blood, right? Now, you have, as they create these other initiatory groups, they have talented and lower diluted bloodlines rising up through Freemasonry to a depth level to the Rosicrucians, to the Illuminati, and then up to the Rosicrucians. But over half of the Rosicrucians are pure blood that now move up and answer to the Council of 300, who answer to the Council of 33, who answer to the 13 families. And who the Rosicrucians also answer to is called the Invisible Ones, as in their Invisible College, which is the alternative name for the Royal Society. But the Invisible Ones are also known as the Hidden World Government in their belief system.
It's just insane how layered they are and how smart they are about the way they do things. I mean, they have groups upon groups upon groups upon groups. So, I mean, you essentially have to really, really dig to get any dirt, and when you do find dirt on one, go ahead and shut them down because there's 10 more over here that are doing the same thing, Yeah.
And so when we talked about this going back to Heliopolis and Moses, as they draft everybody in the Bible up, you can think of, Egypt was the second pillar of the religion coming out of the dispersion of Babel, and the seven sacred sciences and mysticism being respawned at that point in time. So Chaldea and the Magi, where Nimrod goes, is the second sort of pillar, right? And of course, in Masonic history, Nimrod is the first Grand Master of Freemasonry of the post-Diluvian epoch, and Babel is their first manifestation of these building Tower of Babel, just as pyramids would be what the Freemasons credit Enoch for building in the antediluvian epoch.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important about this is that he is the religion of Babel or Babylon, which is the religion of the end time, right?
Yeah.
Right? So you see how all of this just sort of weaves itself together. And so when we look at other orders that are in Masonry and in Gnosticism, we have the order of Melchizedek. And everybody's going to take a step back and go, whoa. I mean, this is the priest that, blessed Abraham. This is the priest that this is the group and priest order in the Bible that, is talked about hand in hand with David and Jesus being part of. You have to understand there's two different orders of Melchizedek. There is the pure order that includes Jesus, Abraham, and David, as the Bible talks about. And then there's the Canaanite order that goes back to Baal and Moloch and bull worship that we were talking about earlier. So let me just connect this final part of it, because they also draft this order of Canaan and overlay that with the Jewish tradition, and again, expect the Antichrist to pull in this order of Melchizedek as part of his pedigree along with his bloodlines, okay? As well as being the king of Jerusalem. And so this order of Zedek is a Canaanite sun god, okay, of light and righteousness. So when you talk about light, understand Freemasons are the children of light, just as the Essenes are the sons of light, the sons of Zedek, okay, the sons of righteousness, okay. And Melchi is, and Zedek was also the rebellious god of God's counsel. So you know who this is going back to.
Yeah. And I mean, don't they always refer to Lucifer as the light bringer, or the So I mean, it's pretty. And then all of these,
and he masquerades as an angel of light.
Sure, all these polytheistic religions always, the main god is the sun god. They're always worshiping the sun. The sun is Lucifer. It's pretty clear cut and easily seen when you figure it out.
Yeah. Now they pervert the first part of Melchizedek into Melchi or Molech, right?
Okay.
Malach, Molech, Melchi. That stands for king. Okay. And there's several different variations of this as we see Malach show up in the Bible, and it's all talking about the god Molech. So he's called Malach, Milcom, Molech, Milcom, Melcom, Chemosh, which is the Moabite version of it. This is, again, the perversion side of this order. And what's interesting is king or prince, and whereof Jerusalem, or the sons of Zadok, are the sons of righteousness and the princes of Jerusalem. This is the Essene order that ends up in the Masonic order and rituals.
Huh.
That is absolutely no coincidence. And Moloch is the son of Baal, who's the son of El, and El is also a morbid, lustful, fallen angel or watcher, as they go back into their pantheon. And this is the same cult of the bull that comes out of Egypt, whether it's the Apis bull cult, which is the calf, or the traditional bull cult, because they have two different sort of parts of that bull cult in Egypt. And when you talk about gospels coming out of Qumran, you have out of the Nag Hammadi library, you have the Sethian sect of gospels, and in there, and that's Amakaseth, which who they thought was another Nephilim.
Hang on, I stopped that a bit early. Hang on. How long did it have to go? Okay, that still had a while to go. So I'll jump on Paul Begley now, and I'll finish with this after Mike's finished talking. Okay, history, Paul Begley. There we are. Got it.
The more you look at it, you see the military.
Oh, that's right. It's his missus.
Aligning their weaponry, making a lot of money with their war chests there. And of course, they need to make the propaganda line up for that. So we will hear from Mike very soon. He's going to come up. He also said that you're going to hear about chemical explosions as you hear about all this wave. There is a chemical explosion that happened in right at the Niagara Falls. Let's see. Workers suffer significant burns nearby as residents evacuated at St. Catherine's chemical plant rocked by explosions and fire. A man was severely injured. Dozens of area residents evacuated. Multiple explosions and fire engulfed the chemical disposable business in St. Catherine's. Firefighters were called to Essenes Products on Thursday. And not only that was going on, but also a worker is missing after a propane explosion in Quebec. So it's a bad day in Canada. An explosion hit a propane facility in Quebec, and at least one worker is missing. Evacuations were underway, and municipal officials earlier said 3 or 4 employees were unaccounted for. But now they're saying at least one person is missing and there could be more. So this was a propane facility that blew up, and earlier it was a chemical facility in St. Catherine's that blew up. So definitely there is something going on with these explosions happening. This near Niagara. One of our online church members' daughter lives close to here, and she sent it to me and was asking for prayer for this situation. Getting close to the canals and the waters, and they were worried that it was going to contaminate the part of the waters where she was. So I thank you to Conchetta, who actually sent this to me, and her daughter lives near this chemical plant, and we were asking for prayers for that. So Mike from around the world should be calling any moment.
Yay!
All right, so
I bet his volume's really loud
make sure that
because
we get
they
all our
never do
connections
Mike's
straight,
volume
right?
good on this channel.
This explosion story
Mhm,
is, I mean, what's going on here? Remember in LaSalle,
mhm,
Illinois, yesterday, there was an explosion of a chemical plant.
mhm.
And then did you say 2 of them in Canada today?
Mhm.
So, I mean, are you serious?
We are
Explosions!
Mhm.
Explosions! I mean, they're happening because, remember, last Thursday, Mike said that you watch for plants to start exploding, chemical plants.
Mhm.
He said, watch for, I'm 1,000% sure there'll be an earthquake, maybe up to 8.0. We had a 7.9. I think they backed it down to 7.7 or something.
Indonesia, yeah.
He told us there'd be at least 2 atmospheric river floods, that would storms that would hit California. They did. 17, 18 people are now dead, and 2 more rivers are coming.
Mhm.
And that's exactly why I watch Mike from around the world. What he says comes true. Guys, you know I'm not keen on Paul Begley. He's all about making money. But Mike from around the world, he delivers on his prophecies.
What else did he tell us that was going to happen?
Sounds crazy.
I mean, everything that he said last Thursday has happened in a week, Heidi. Are you serious?
We are serious, and the what do you call it? The planes are grounded.
Oh yeah, he said don't be surprised if soon you'll see all the planes grounded.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Are you okay?
yes, that eye just kind of hurts, but you know,
Mhm.
they say though,
Mhm.
they say, Heidi, that I'm going to be able to see. They think 2020. The doctor really felt good about it today.
Mhm.
I may not even need to wear glasses at all.
That'd be awesome.
I don't know if I'm still going to wear sunglasses because that one thing on this side, but
Mhm.
we'll see.
We'll see.
A lot of prayers going.
We're hopeful.
A lot of prayers.
Mhm.
And Mike will join us any moment.
Any moment.
And I'm just here to tell you how beautiful you are tonight.
Aw,
But I got caught flirting in the chat room by RoboMom.
Uh-oh.
It's not allowed, guys. It's not allowed. The moderators are tough in there. I guess. Sorry. I am married to her, okay? It is my show. Oh, wait, it was my show. Okay, but she's right. We got to keep the rules. We got to follow the rules. Okay. Thank you, Roland. Mom. Thank you. Do you see Mike?
No.
Mike's late.
It's late.
If
For
you
a
guys,
very important date.
let me just say something. If you guys didn't see it on Patreon, the interview I did with Mike, exclusive interview with Mike, it's only on Patreon because he dropped the bombs in there. He brought some stuff out. There he is. I think that's Mike. Is that Mike from around the world?
God bless you, Pastor Paul. How you doing this evening?
No, I had the eye surgery, so I'm kind of backing out.
I told you the audio would be bad.
All right.
So Heidi's here, so get ready, Mike. You better put your seatbelt on because don't she ask all the
turn
tough
that down.
questions.
Yep, I got it. And get the brain case on just in case.
That's right. You definitely need that. Now get me out of the way. Now you got somebody intellectually on your level.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Heidi, good to see you. God bless you.
God bless. How are you today?
Good. I just sat down, so hopefully everything holds up here.
Hopefully. Hopefully. So what's going on?
What's not going on? We have everything going on.
Yeah.
Everything.
We still got fallout happening.
Of course, yeah, that will continue for a while. We have there are data chunks coming in, and I want to address something too. A lot of people, right? They have access to public sensors, data, stuff like that, right?
Okay.
Well, normally with any type of event that comes outside the solar system internally, nobody hears about it until about a year later. Same thing happened in 2004, December 27, 2004. We had an event. Actually, 2004, 2006, 2000, on up to 2022. And they are not cataloged until they are released and peer reviewed, scrubbed, all that good stuff. And so I just want everybody to note, because sometimes you have people out there say, I didn't see anything. Well, of course you didn't, because you're using public sensors and published data. They're not going to put that out there until about a year later. So, yeah, it remains somewhat of an enigma. That keeps everybody somewhat neutral, because if a person's out there trying to research, they have nothing to rely upon except data. If the Lord did not give it to them, or if they're not, right there in the seat observing, they have no idea. So that's how that works. At any rate, we still have an influx of those cosmic rays coming in, and now they just don't. Just so everybody gets the idea, they always are hitting the heliosphere. It's why we have the heliosphere. Galactic cosmic rays always come in, but when you have a pulse, when you have a sheer increase of influx of these particles, that's where you have problems from, because they're always pouring in either from the sun or externally from the heliosphere, or deep in space hitting the heliosphere.
Right.
I'm trying not to get nerdy, because then you have to deal with the particle count, which deals with health. For example, 89% of the some of the protons that are coming in, they will affect people's health. Alpha particles are certainly going to affect electronics. Other nuclei, which constitute probably about 1%, but at a very high rate, they're going to affect things in a weird way. And we have a buildup happening, and they will continue to be this way. This is going to continue to happen. People will begin to have radiation sickness. That'll be a norm. Part of it's already a norm, but that will become a norm, and will continue to increase, because we have many more events coming.
So do we have a date on the next pulse? Would you call it a pulse?
Yeah, we have one. Actually, we have it's kind of like a threefold event happening at the end of at mid-month next month, and we're going to have to get closer to that so we can really pick this apart and see what's going to happen, because as we continue to have these pulses, we're getting closer and closer to one of the major events. Is what it's actually coming up to. In other words, we've had some activity in space. Many, well, let's just say it's continuous, and it's been tracked. And it's very dangerous. Now, obviously, if something is going to cause severe damage to the Earth, they will not publish anything. But people will be, they're going to be firsthand witnesses of the effects that are going to, happen afterwards. So this is a situation we are in. For example, we talked about, I think we talked about inbounds. Remember we did talk about inbounds. And I said that nobody knows that we have an inbound coming in. It's not published anywhere, but when it gets here, all of a sudden everybody's an expert. So we have lots of inbound objects coming in that they're not listed. You may find a couple of them listed as they come in, but they won't talk about them unless they either don't pose a risk or everybody can start to see them. And in this case, they will cause a risk. So they're not going to talk about them, but amateur astronomers, they're going to pick this up and start talking about it. They're going to have to cover it because we'll see a greater density of objects coming right towards us. Meteor storms are going to become a normal.
Meteor storms.
Yes, not meteor showers, but meteor storms. That's actual aerial bursting, ground bursts that will have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you said the alpha waves, would that cause like heart attacks, interfere with the cardiac?
Alpha particles, when they, of course, that's about 9% of the cosmic radiation. Cosmic radiation, by the way, is in two parts. It's in from the sun. High energy particles stemming from the sun, those are mostly protons. High energy particles from deep in space they are of another variant, very exotic particles, but most of them, 89% protons. Alpha particles are somewhere around 9%, and they cause a severe problem. The 1% causes a lot of inert elements to become explosive, activate, it changes them. But this 9% of the alpha particles, once we get that heavy influx, as in 2004, it starts to affect the brain big time. Biological elements get affected. Of course, this they're called high Z energy ions. They also are in those galactic cosmic rays, and they are extremely dangerous. In fact, they spend a lot of money to find out how to shield spacecraft and astronauts from these high Z energy ions in space. That's only 1% of the galactic cosmic rays, by the way, and but they cause severe biological damage. And we're going to start experiencing that on the Earth. We already have to a degree in sporadic areas. Of course, they're not going to tell everybody that our shielding is down sometimes to a degree that these particles penetrate. Because I'll tell you something. When they start coming in, there's something to look for. And they start hitting in the high altitude, the entirety of the sky in those areas is going to turn red. It's going to turn red. That means we're having high altitude collisions, right? That red, of course, has the longest wavelength, and so of light. So we're going to see that red color. That's not a good sign. It may be captivating, but it's not going to be a good sign. And when we start to experience that, biological issues are going to follow immediately after. Immediately. Mm-hmm. But there, again, if we're reaching a point of no return, they're going to make preparations for themselves. You're going to have a lot of rich people that will make preparations for themselves. And the activity we have in the world is exactly what you would have if you have these high-end corporations, high-positioned folks and people. If they're going to prepare, they would maneuver the world just like it's being maneuvered today to make sure that they are preserved during that time. Mm-hmm. You'd have all this. You'd have supply issues. You would have, I believe we talked before the new year, we talked about a governmental civil war. That's a very notable statement I use that term because nobody, that term is not found anywhere. But that's precisely what we're having. Is we're gearing up to have a governmental civil war. They're about to thrust in a brand new system, and the only way to do that is to disprove the old. They have to convince everybody and get everybody involved, sick of the older system, of what they trusted in so much, they have to break it down piece by piece. In this case, they have to do it fast because the time span has been collapsed. They thought they had more time in certain areas to do certain things. That's not the case. So we're going to see an escalation of activities from these guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everything's been moved up.
Yes.
So
yeah,
when you say the biological, are you talking neurological then?
Yes, big time. Which, by the way, which is why they have, there are a lot of projects out there that are specifically put forward. A lot of money spent in these areas to protect certain individuals from any of this influx of these galactic cosmic rays or radiation period, so they can be sustained, so they can be preserved during that time. And if you think about it, if anybody looks into these projects, especially dealing with the brain and your neurological system, every single project that has computers involved and AI involved, right? If you can reconstitute the human brain and the neurological system in a computer, in other words, map it, if you can do that, you can also repair damage or replace broken pieces or affected pieces of individuals who have been exposed and shouldn't have been exposed. We haven't, but that will be no good if you didn't have some sort of project dealing with magnetism. It's a known fact that radiation follows electromagnetic field lines, right? So those lines of force, if you can replicate them, you can essentially redirect radiation anywhere you want it to be. You can put a bubble over a city, for example, and radiation will not penetrate the city. It will follow those lines of force to any direction they want, right? Now, look at CERN, a part of CERN. They have super magnets that are, you're talking about something that was achieved. And if you look into it, they spent a lot of time and a lot of money on the magnets. They have to be perfect. The computer system that runs the magnets, because they have to be energized at specific times to keep those high charged particles in that tubing. So that's precise timing. Well, if you can do that, you can also redirect any type of radiation bombardment over a city, over half of a country. They can do that with the magnets at CERN right now. They can do that right now with the magnets at CERN. And so I believe it was, who was it, BP Earthwatch, that was talking about every time they turn CERN on, something happens with the magnetic field. Well, that exposed something. But I know for a fact people didn't like that. Let's put it that way. They didn't like that, and that was unexpected. Mm-hmm. But in fact, that's one of the greatest discoveries, one of the greatest experiments. It's very solid, and it works. That plane that went down, for example, when they lost containment and the protons shot out of CERN itself, it didn't really hurt anybody, but it went right through an aircraft. And I believe CERN is down like 14 or 15 aircraft since that time. Wow. Because if you lose containment with those magnets, those protons are traveling at a very fast rate. And then they hit electronics, they're going to fry. They have to be contained. And that was more than likely the case with quite a few things, because they will go straight up. Well, that should demonstrate that these magnets are certainly set in place. And if you turn them on, they have an effective weapon against radiation, radioactive fallout, same thing, right? Because radiation is always going to follow those high-speed particles, going to follow those lines of force and magnetism. Same way the Earth shields us from cosmic rays. It goes to the north and to the south pole regions, right? It's redirected over the whole Earth, taken into the Earth by those lines of force. So it's the same principle. And CERN has magnets that are much more powerful than the magnetic shielding of the Earth.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And so the next biggest CERN, it's not called CERN, is in right outside of Chicago, right?
Which one?
It's a Large Hadron Collider right outside of Chicago. I can't remember.
Yeah, they have two.
Yeah, the town's Batavia. Is it Batavia, Illinois?
Now that's a list I would have to pull up, but there are lots of them all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, with that data collection that they utilize, and all of them, if you take note, New York has the same facility, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have the magnets, correct? Chicago has the magnets. They have magnets. They have that same system of containment in the larger cities. Even in China, they have the same facilities. That same technology is there. This is worldwide over key cities. So it almost looks like they're ready to preserve certain cities because they know what's going to happen in the celestials. So they can preserve certain cities. And those cities those cities at their core are going to stand. Everything outside of that, it's going to be a lost cause.
Right. Yeah. Somebody just put it up. It's like Fermi Lab in Batavia.
Yeah, that's one of them. There's well, I don't know. I'm going to have to get a list of those things for you guys. I believe it's 142 facilities in the USA alone. That's in the USA alone. At 142, that's pretty high count. Yeah. Plus the star cities, 3 star cities in China. Of course, Israel and some other places. But I guess one of my major points is that they're set up while they're doing CERN. CERN is doing one thing, and it's a very real project on many different levels. But the one thing that is people can see right now for themselves is that these facilities are set up with super powerful magnets that can absolutely protect whatever's around them. They can protect it. They can also direct these magnetic field lines in any direction they want. I believe it's 19 facilities have the ability to redirect those magnetic field lines and concentrate them to any point they want to, given a certain radius. That's called weaponization of these magnets. So if they want radiation to be concentrated in a certain place, they could absolutely do it. And people wouldn't understand what was happening. Just think about that one. Because if we have, if somebody had an aurora, and let's say it penetrated a little too far, they could actually redirect all that radiation to a specific point.
Now that makes sense because yes, I was looking at the list and I saw that it was near the major cities and always associated with universities, and so now that you're saying that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So and you have to look it up as Large Hadron Colliders. So then it'll make sense to you guys. The people in that chat rooms are saying, what kind of facilities are you talking about? So yeah, if you look it up that way, then you'll find it. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's actually they're trying to put in a protective network.
Yeah, they have one, that and among other things, because each place they're at is also a travel hub. Why would a travel hub be in the exact same places as those facilities? All that is kind of like some of the talks that we have, me and Pastor Paul, and then stuff happens. It could be coincidence. It could be. I don't think Pastor Paul says I don't think so, but all these things line up. There's some sort of there's a plan on the way. We know biblically that these guys have dedicated places they're going to go to.
Right, and that would make sense because the drilling it takes to even make these round things to get these magnets in. It would only make sense.
That's right.
Yeah, to get
that. That's right. That exposes a lot of technology. A lot of technology, because these are precise tunnels. These are laden with precise equipment, and this stuff is, milled to, it's just very precise. Lots of technology, but the average person will not question. They won't look at that and say, well, how did they get that in there without everybody seeing, or how are they transporting these large magnets and nobody saw it? Right? Or these large coils, and nobody knew they were ever in transition. How do they do this? And why are they positioned in these cities near travel hubs? And a few of them are at special airports that have special markings inside the airport. All those airports are identical. And so it's because if all this is real, they have to prepare and they have to do it quickly. And that takes what? I believe the last estimate was a 45-year plan. So they would have had to have started a long time ago to get this stuff going. And it takes a lot of money. I know a lot of people think that a large amount of the black budget goes into weaponry, but money is more of a construct that we have to survive. They don't need money. They're in control of it. They don't really need it. They do things to keep us engaged. They see people as subjects, more subjects than anything else, and we stay engaged while they prepare to save themselves. We are the laborers, and they utilize our minds and our gifts and abilities for their sakes. Because even everything that's invented that's ingenious, they will snatch, they will take. They recruit from universities. This is every single year. Lots of kids disappear into black operations and the military-industrial complex, basically, to do research on things they can never tell anybody. In the USA right now, people would check out Google Earth and not look for anomalies so much, but secret cities. We have a lot of secret cities inside the USA. Well, for what? I mean, just like China, we have ghost cities in the USA. That's weird, right?
Right.
But they're planning. So for all this, my point is, if something is coming towards us, if we do have it or in a binary system, if all these things are beginning to happen, if the Bible is absolutely true and Revelation is true, they would have to be 3/4 into preparations. And if they were, then the conditions we have right now is exactly what we're supposed to see. Governmental fights. We know the weather's changing. We know it's not HARP because HARP has been down. HARP is damaged. Isn't that funny? So is Russia's HARP. It's damaged due to sabotage. They can't use it. They even tried to seed with P3 Orions certain things, and it didn't work because the chemical composition of the atmospheres were laden with heavy particles they stuck up there to reflect the sun's light, and it's still not working. They've been desperately trying to cool the planet off. That's what they've been trying to do. And it's not working. And it has side effects, sure, and they utilize those side effects, but it's not working. Now you have icebergs turning over more and more. All these things are starting to happen, and everything is conflagrating. This year, it looks like, this year and next year, everything is conflagrating.
Right. 23 and 24 are going to be rough years.
They will. It's already. I hope that my hope is that people see it. Okay, let me not talk too much on it because my motors will get going and that's it.
Yes. Well, so let's talk about Russia and what's happening over there. General Armageddon has been demoted. So what does that mean?
Valery, what's the guy's name? Gerasimov. He's the new fella. Well, you can't have he panned out to be a little too on the fruit ball side. He did. He was too aggressive he was more or less aggressive against the enemy, but he was not willing to do certain things against. He became soft with the people in Russia. Putin needs somebody who will enforce things, period. Right? That's how they work. He does not need anybody who's compromised. This other General Armageddon, he was compromised by certain groups inside of Russia, and Putin cannot trust anybody at this point. Not too many people at this point, and he's disloyal to a degree. He will enrich himself. He has some criminal activity connected with him, and so Putin said no. This other guy that's coming in, however, will enforce. For example, military protocol, both in country and out of country, he will enforce. He is a tactical guy, yes, but he also has relationships, international relationships that can be utilized because Russia is not only dealing with in their part of the world, but they're also activating in the Middle East. They also have to negotiate and continue to do side operations with China and North Korea and places like that. So this guy may prove to be, well, he may prove to be highly effective. This, by the way, Russia is at war with the West and its alliances, period. And vice versa. This is not just Ukraine. Ukraine it's just a base, you could say, a stepping stone, and it's going to become quite large here shortly. The Middle East is activating, for example. There's going to be a lot of military movements in the Middle East, and somebody's going to do a first strike in the Middle East, probably, I would say, within the next 2 months, because they have to. Things have escalated quite a bit there, and they're going to take advantage of it. Now, the USA doesn't want anybody to do anything prior to elections. That's going to be very important. But this governmental civil war in the United States is going to get in the way of quite a few things, possibly. So we'll see. Things will escalate because they want to see where people are. In the end of things, Sister Heidi, they need people to give over their praise to what they're doing. That's what they need. They need people's praise. They always need that. They need people to be a part of it. They need people to get their hands dirty. So they get people riled up, and then people pick a side, not really understanding that all sides are tainted. And they pick a side and start fighting against something they may not know the totality of. But they need people. If they weren't I heard a guy say they want to kill everybody. Well, they could have done that 1,000 times over. They don't want that. They want people to corrupt themselves. They don't want anybody to be redeemable. They don't. And they are highly Luciferian at their core. And they can't, the age of Christ, they continue to say, they say this all the time, the age of Christ the rule of Christ must end, period. That's what their declaration is. It must end.
And so I don't know if you heard Pastor Paul do a story about where the Chagall, I think is his name, asked the Pentagon was the U.S. using psychic warfare against the Russians. Did you hear that one?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
No, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah.
Psychic warfare never ended.
Yeah.
It never ended. Can I give an example?
Yes.
I'm going to give an example. What makes a Christian, right? Nobody get angry either, but what makes a Christian cringe is when you thrust them into a political argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get a Christian to step into politics, they almost lose their Christianity, right? What is that? Well, that's almost like you have to be programmed to cause somebody to do that without really realizing it. First of all, you have to believe what you're hearing to get emotional about it. So they have done an effective job at counterintelligence and all this psychic stuff and whatever, all the stuff they're doing to get people in position so that they will be overly charged. Because every time somebody fights for something, they're praising if you fight against one thing, you're actually praising something else. You're going to lift up one thing and put down the other. And that's what they want people to do. So, but how do they maneuver everybody into this? Constant little dirty secret plans. That's just like MK Ultra. That was only one element of a very large scaled operation that's still underway to this very day. And if a person's not careful, there are trigger words that they can hear that will set them on fire. Yep. They even have these public sacrifices that they will set up so that people will start buying into the story and give over their, I guess you could say, their soul to another cause again, right? They get charged doing this because every time a person gets into something like that, I guess you could say they're turning away from the principles of Christ. And that empowers them. That really empowers them. Psychically, they have people lined up all over the place. Any gifted person in the USA is going to be noticed. any gifted person is going to be noticed. It used to be before they came out with a new phone system. Anybody who really conveyed any real ability to forecast anybody else's circumstances, they would tag their phones and everything else. They would. Now, they changed the protocol since times of old. They used to go and get people, just kind of snatch them up, drug them up, and they wouldn't know who they were, anything else, and then start utilizing them or pay them a lot of money, get them involved. They don't do that anymore. They found out if you leave a person to their own devices, especially with technology in place now, a person will volunteer everything they know. They'll always volunteer everything they know. Communications are not secure. Everybody agrees to a EULA when they use their cell phone, end user's license agreement. Your conversation, you just gave up to everybody else. Your text messages, you gave up to everybody else. Your replies, you gave up to everybody else. A machine interprets that, right? But also the people who check the machines and inventory the machines, they're able to collect that data and that EULA. In that EULA, we agree that they can do that. So there you are. They don't need to go and have the person working in office. All they have to do is seed a conversation or seed some sort of issue, and people will talk about it. And they tag the gifted people and extract the information from it.
Interesting.
That always happens.
Mm-hmm. So this is what they asked. They said the FSO is preparing personnel for massive ideological attack in which the enemy uses media, social networks, religious organizations, hypnosis, PSI generators. What are PSI generators?
Those are, well, you can call them an amplifier. Call them an amplifier. So we have some of the equipment. Let's talk about some of the older equipment. Because some of the older equipment was when they had tubes and things like that. They used to take some of these guys from Tibet, some of the guys that meditated, and they would put them in capsules, these big electronic capsules, and actually amplify their biological signals, which were essentially resonance signals or radio signals, to see if they had an effect externally. Well, they found out they did. In fact, Germany found this out first. They did it first, and they affected an entire populace, right? They calmed an entire populace. That was a one day England was calmed. They didn't know what happened, but it's almost like everybody lost their will to fight. The next day, the next 2 days when they turned it off, everybody was raving mad. They were just charged up. But they essentially zapped an entire populace. They calmed them down. So with that, you can influence emotions, right? And that's one of the major things. Not so much making a person do something specifically, but if you can enhance certain emotions and deter others, you can control a populace. And if that technology was developed way back then in the 40s, right? You can only imagine what's being used today. They also have sound equipment. Some of the sound equipment, they know the resonance of every organ in the human body, right? It's already mapped. They know about the neurological system. It too is mapped. They know the resonance. I'm going to just say resonance. It's another term they use. I can't use that term there, but they know the resonance of all of what makes you work in the body. They can essentially begin to shut down certain nerve groups in a person. For example, somebody could be sitting there and all of a sudden their knees could hurt so bad they have to get up and move, right? When you get up and move, you find that it's almost like they never did hurt. You go sit in another place in your house, nothing. You go back to your desk at your computer, everything is amplified, right? That actually happens to people. If they'll be sitting behind a computer working on a specific thing, all of a sudden they have aches and pains they never thought they would ever have. They're uncomfortable. Or they feel so irritated and aggravated they can't even look at the screen, so they have to get up and walk away. If they go anywhere else, they're at peace. They go back to the computer, that peace is disrupted, right? So there you are. That's not just a fluke or a coincidence of resonance the machine is putting out. Things can be targeted that way. And ever since they came out with cell phones, every cell phone, in order for you to have a conversation, your exact location must be identified, right? It has to be coordinated and identified. That means everybody who has a conversation, they know your exact position on the face of the earth, the entire conversation. In order for you to connect your phone to a network, they have to know your exact location. So that's triangulation. So they know where everybody is. Everybody is a number to a machine, and every person has a 4D profile with a rating on it, which means you're helpful or not, but it's a lot more levels than that. And if they, they can influence people that do specific things in certain ways. And they can do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with a press of a button.
I think this is where Pastor Paul goes, what? Right now. What do you mean by a 4D profile?
Well, yeah, but 3 dimensions is what you see, right?
Uh-huh.
So 4D is what you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
A fourth dimension is something nobody sees, right? But a fourth dimension will be information that people aren't readily thinking about. When people go into Walmart, you'd be surprised to know you got a complete bone scan. They know the points of identification on your bone structure. Your bone structure normally does not change within gaps of, I believe it's 5 years apiece. And so everybody has, just like facial identification, they started out with 3,000 points to identify the face. Now they have 30,000, right? Your face is like a fingerprint. The whole body is like a fingerprint now. They have optics to see right through you. You're scanning your groceries. And if you notice, all you have to do is peek down in there. You got more than what is it, 5 lasers working in there. They used to have NCR, I believe the company was, that would go, specialized folks that would go in there and work on those things. Now they have very sophisticated scanning equipment. They scan more than groceries.
Right.
Yeah.
I know they have these smart lights. They changed all the lights in Lafayette, and they're the weirdest lights you ever did see. I don't know what all they're scanning. And they put walls up in them as well.
Yeah, they can see in all spectrums.
Yeah.
But again, Sister Heidi, this is how they program this. People buy a car, right? You expect to get a car. What you don't expect is for you to have X-ray reflective material in the seats, so they get better pictures of you inside and out, right? Nobody expects that. Now that sounds, what is that? When you start thinking of things like this, nobody can escape it. Nobody's going to escape it. No Christian should actually worry about it, because we never had privacy. Nobody has had privacy in 40 years. So, hate to tell them, they can listen through walls. We have a false sense of security against these people, right? But here's my small advice concerning that. If people get worried about their security from the government listening, they might want to reconsider that God can hear everything, even your thoughts and everything else. So just all you have to do is think of that, and all of a sudden the government's no big deal. But just dealing with the car itself, nobody expects their car seats to be specially designed to reflect X-rays back into another, some other optics, so you can be seen better. This is how the world is constructed, and they're utilizing all these elements for the people, to get the people to do exactly what they want them to do and keep them cataloged.
Right. And we were, I don't remember what movie or something we saw the other day, right, babe? And they were saying they were taking their, it was like that little mini EKG, and they were saying this is the new biometric. And I was like, well, Paul, they're selling that all over Amazon, telling you need to do, set this up with your doctor's office.
Yeah. They, in fact, I believe they have chips. The same people, MIT folks that set out and made certain MCUs or microcontroller units, now have lots of medical devices that anybody can go and buy. Right? Anybody can go and buy those. BCI devices are readily available for anybody who does computer development or hardware development. They can go and buy the interface that talks to your brain, right? That picks up your brain language. Now they have the interpreter chip, which means it used to be you could pick up waves from the brain. Now you pick up the actual information from the brain, because what when they mapped the brain, they actually mapped the language of all the neurons. Right. So they know the combinations of neurological firing, and it's now a language. So they can essentially, they have units, handheld units they can pass by you. If they get within a foot, or I think it's like 3 feet from you, right? Or if you get your head near something, they can actually read what you're thinking about. Right. Because you're always transmitting something. It's always transmitting. So, they've gone a long way.
Now, is that available to the public yet? Or is
Yes,
yes.
yes,
That's
it
what you're
is.
saying.
It is. So you know it's much more sophisticated
Mhm.
in the hidden side of things.
Mhm. Yes. That's very interesting. Yeah, I just saw actually a facility here in Tampa and Naples that was doing the brain mapping of the brain waves, and they were using it for things like ADHD and and I think dementia as well, but ADHD for sure. And I was like, that is very, very interesting.
Yes, and that's on the public commercial side. Just imagine what the architects have done when it began. What was it, 2004, going up to 2007 and 9? Just think what they have done, because it never ended,
Mhm.
but it was completed a few years ago.
Right.
That whole initiative they have 2 operational brains inside their simulations, inside of computers that are operational, fully operational. So they mapped the entirety of it. Remember Obama's brain initiative?
Yes.
Well, if you follow that money, you'll find out it went to a lot of universities. It went to specific individuals.
Mhm.
When they mapped the brain, everybody was inspired and said, hey, we can make the devices now.
Mhm.
Right? The only thing, like the B system technology, there was one thing they were missing. That's the power source.
Mhm.
You can have all that fancy electronics,
Mhm.
but what do you want to power it by?
Right.
Well, they perfected the power systems a couple of years ago.
Mhm. Yeah.
The lithium, your phone batteries, that's about to be obsolete. Lithium is about to be obsolete. They're going to use that just like they do oil, so they can keep people under control. Because you can make people believe you need something, and when you do that, you can have them fight for a cause. Therefore, you keep them engaged. You can also control people that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually signed up to follow the brain mapping, up project that they're doing, and a lot of it was out of Israel.
Yeah, Israel makes a lot of, I would say most of the electronic advancements, technological advancements that we have in AI, that we have in, well, because that's the AI base, is going to be found in Israel.
Mhm.
Same people who developed the cell phone.
Mhm.
I believe it was a woman who who initialized the cell phone. She made up the cell phone. That was in Israel. So a lot of the really advanced ideas come from Israel.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Not the rest of the world, just Israel. Everybody else kind of steals it and they go from there. But Israel, they are incredibly blessed. They may not know it, but they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I've been watching that for quite a while, so it's been very amazing. It's like the Genome Project is still going on as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. The cure for cancer.
Mm-hmm.
There are some articles floating around that are not fake.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just not fake, man. That's another fight, because they keep the population controlled through medicine a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say it's like a Thorazine drip. And they keep people on the Thorazine drip, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't have them too smart. So
Right. Well, you know that we have a family full of nurses, and the healthcare has totally turned upside down, and it's not for the better. So
it's immoral.
yeah.
It's too many immoral people involved, and
Mm-hmm.
it's it's got some dark spots in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you better get geared up and better get healthy the best you can,
Yeah.
because it's not.
Hopefully people can downgrade their taste palates.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody's noticed, but food is changing. It does not taste the same. It does not. And there are laws out there. They don't have to tell people like GMOs and certain things anymore. So I hope people realize that. Those are very dangerous laws. They don't have to disclose certain ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start tasting it, well, there are lots of things I won't touch anymore.
Yeah.
I personally won't touch them. But yeah, things are changing, and it's changing fast.
Yeah, I heard somebody just the other day say the orange juice with pulp is not really juice and not really pulp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like
It's like Sunny Delight, right? You remember Sunny Delight? Everybody likes Sunny D, right?
Mhm.
Sunny D was made out of all the rotten oranges that were left over.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was made from.
Yeah.
And it was pressed through a net to get all the bad stuff out. And people, they marketed that until they were sued a few times, but they kept selling it. And you could actually, because I tasted a Sunny Delight. I just picked one up. I didn't even realize it because it was in the commissary, and I picked it up and I put that in my mouth, and I can instantly taste rotten orange peelings, and so that didn't work. That didn't work.
No. They can make all this 3D meat now. They don't have to tell you.
No, they don't. People have eaten a lot. It's bad. That's a bad area to go into because they do things to meat that the average person, they wouldn't understand, Sister Heidi.
No.
But they force people unknowingly. People have been indoctrinated into something. I'll tell you, without the blood of the lamb, not one of us could make it. It wouldn't matter how perfect we think we are. Without the blood of the lamb, none of us would make it.
Exactly.
Because there are areas we can't, we're engaging in. We have no clue what we're participating in.
No. And then when you get into, where Paul went through the marketplace and he couldn't eat the meat that was prayed over to the gods. I mean, we have no idea.
Yeah. Because he knew, and that's rough. A lot of people, they want to know everything, right? No, they don't. Because the more you know, the more you're accountable for. Somebody could, Paul couldn't eat that meat, but somebody could have came behind him. If they honestly knew nothing about it, they could eat the meat and would not be condemned by it. But because Paul knew it, he had an obligation to uphold righteousness within himself, and he couldn't partake of it, no matter how hungry he was. So the more a person knows, the more they're going to find themselves with limitations on just about everything in this world.
Right. And, that's what we've been working on, is trying to get healthy. And because, when the last pandemic came through, obesity and diabetes was the number one comorbidity. So, you have to try to take care of yourself.
It is, and they ask good your nurse, because nutritionalists, I believe, they try to tell people certain things about combinations, like for example, kidney stones. People can go the medical route, but kidney stones normally are caused by the body making bad calcium due to a lack of calcium. And what do they tell everybody? That they're lactose intolerant. They found out what that actually is on the at the DNA base. They found out exactly what that is. That can be flipped and reversed in a couple of days. Isn't that funny?
Well, you need
There's a lot of findings like that are coming out. Yeah, there are a lot of, and diabetes, same thing. That was more or less induced on people. It's kind of like these grounded planes. They come out with these. People see grounded planes and they come out and say, "Well, what did it? I think it was a computer bug." Really? Right? But they didn't know the first day. That'd be the first thing they would identify. Here's what they never told anybody. A day ago? Canada had the same problem. Did you know that?
I heard something about Canada, but I didn't know the specifics.
Their aircraft did it too, but that wasn't the only place. It happened overseas in a couple of places too. So there's something greater. That's why everybody came on board, and they're trying to come on board to sell a story, so everybody believes it, and everybody is. If they come out concerned, right? This is a tactic. You have an important person, they come out, they're very concerned because they'll say they don't know. They have to look concerned. Once they give everybody a solution and the people say, "Oh, that's what it is," the populace calms down. That means they messed up. That's what it means, they messed up. And sometimes it's good to look right through that. I'll give you a coincidence. You ready?
Okay.
17 events, right?
Right.
17 events, 17 dead in California.
Okay.
Coincidence? Or somebody, what's happening with that? Look at all these lineups and then ask yourself again, well, what's happening here, right? There are people out there all the time. They're trying to tell people a narrative. They're hoping they get it. There's only so much a person can say. And they have to stay enigmatic, puzzling, confusing, and everything else. But things are closer than what people think. And without notification, without people really understanding and knowing, a lot of people are going to find themselves in a very strange predicament, very unfortunate predicament. My hope, Well, a lot of people so upset they don't find themselves in that predicament.
Right.
But the only security is a spiritual security. Everything else will most certainly fail.
Exactly.
Everything else is going to fail. But with spiritual security, just like God did supernatural things a long time ago, and he already told us, he still does it, but not like he did in times of old, but that's coming back where he will supernaturally protect you as in the days of old.
Amen.
The deliverance is coming just like Israel was delivered. And a lot of people, because they don't see it, they're not used to it, they don't really believe it. But there are people out there trying to tell them a narrative of the impossible, because the impossible is soon to take place yet again. And I hope that people are ready. They're trying to get people subtle messages, and people should listen. These repeated phrases, if you see them and find them, they'll capture your attention. I hope that people are paying attention, because they actually mean something. Certainly in this day and age, time is shorter than what anybody thinks. And the events are much closer to home than what any of us would like.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope that people get that. I hope they get that.
Right. So what's the next thing we need to be ready for?
Everything we talked about, Heidi. We have the Earth is going to another phase of phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth is, and as you may or may not know, they're soon to introduce the unthinkable is on its way. It's on its way, and that'll be the unthinkable people will be introduced to. It's on its way, and that will be one of those by force things to some, but to others they will absolutely accept it. You're looking at a time coming. A lot of people talk about the beast kingdom, but have they ever considered what happens when it gets here? Because in the Bible, didn't it say that this beast must be revealed? That means we're going to see the system itself. We don't have to be a part of it. But we're going to have some things revealed. They will be revealed. People will see them. And it's going to be a challenge for a lot of people because, well, to be truthful, they don't have a lot of faith in what Jesus said already. And that's what they could work on right now. So this weather phenomena is going to be brutal. It's going to get very brutal. Lives are going to be lost. I can't emphasize that enough. There will be events that consume lots of people at once. There'll be other events that consume, a few here and there. But collectively, they're going to be brutal. Nobody's going to be immune from what's coming, from what's happening, from what's forming. And if what's happening in California, because we have a band of moisture traveling around the planet, that's only getting worse. We have heat shears coming, right? Heat and cold shears are coming. So atmospheric rivers is going to be one of those common terms, but they're going to have to develop a whole lexicon of words that describe very deadly events, and they're going to have to be very careful in doing it. We didn't have this level of moisture last year. We did not. The ocean temperatures are steadily increasing, and the icebergs are flipping over. They're exposing the dark side of icebergs. It's like a dark greenish, bluish color, right? They're flipping totally over. And what that means is they're breaking away from the surface underneath. They're starting to flip. That's an indication that two of the ice sheets are about to break. When they start flipping like that, that means the cohesion on the ground level of these icebergs is lost. The erosion has taken effect, and these things are flipping. So that means two shelves are going to totally break off, and people are going to endure what they don't want to endure. And I know that a lot of people say, well, God's not going to destroy the earth by a flood. No, he will not. He said he will not destroy life on the earth by a flood. He never said we wouldn't have floods. In fact, Jesus said there would be earthquakes and all these things in diverse places, right? Floods, we're going to have floods. Coastlines are going to be changed. Erosion will take effect. Highways are already buckled in California. Nobody's going to escape that in the Midwest. There are serious reconsiderations of NORAD taking place. I know everybody thinks that's a solid facility, but erosion is a big deal now, right? Magma's eroded or made new channels in a lot of places. Saltwater intrusion is taking effect, and things are changing quick. They're changing very quick.
Mm-hmm.
So those things to look out for, to get prepared for. Yes, radiation can be, that can be mitigated largely. Get your bodies prepared to handle more and more things.
Right.
Don't try not to end up, because it took me 10 years to stop consuming sugar, period. Right? It took me. Why? Because there's actually, there's a little creature in the body that demands sugar. And people don't know this.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to kill that little bug out of your system, you got to start with a sugar. It cuts up and acts up too. It will affect you mentally, but it can be done. And believe it or not, if I were to, when you do that, when you start to eliminate sugar, it sounds impossible, but it's not. The only reason I did it is because half the places you go that I go is just not available, and that's terrible, right? So, but what I did find was your sense of smell changes, your sense of taste is different. For example, an apple that everybody says is not sweet, sour, this, that, and the other, it smells like the sweetest thing you ever smelled in your life. So creation starts smelling better, right?
Right.
But these subtle changes will help, because if it's going to be things like that will be cut off. Suppose they cut off sugar consumption, or it's rationed, right? Believe it or not, somebody may say, well, that's not a big deal. Yes, it is, because if they cut off sugar, it's going to affect people mentally, right? It's going to be something they lose. It can cause depression, because a person will say, I can't get this, my life is over. And what it exposes is that people have built their life around these comforts. And it's time to break those comforts. Do it yourself. Don't let anybody else do it. Do it yourself. People should do it themselves. Just break their own comfort a little bit. Start, not doing things, and see what it exposes in your thought process, your life, and everything else, and become strong again. The body already knows what to do, right? The body knows what to do. If we don't lay it down with things like that, I mean, they're trying to make people consume a lot of metallic things, so they're better receptors of other things, right? That's no good. So if people would just back down on their taste palate, start taking a serious consideration of their diet. Personally, I know a lot of people use alternative products. Folks like yourself, how do you, a nurse? I know you do homework as far as stuff like dietary stuff. I know you do your homework in that, but if people would do their homework in that, they would find out that God has already put small manufacturing facilities in place. They're called plants. And they take all types of ingredients and perfectly mix them together. They will produce something called a fruit, which when you ingest it is perfect for the body. God already has a pharmacy out there. We just have to get our knowledge back to learn what to harvest and what not to harvest. Right. And that takes a little time. So, yeah, but that would be beneficial for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, and my son actually, he took a lot of botany when he was at Purdue just because he liked it. And
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's just like his hobby that he likes to do. And he was finding out he was having trouble buying peat moss. They're just not allowing it.
Right.
He's like, how do you not get a hold of peat moss now?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there are little quirky things like that all over the place, because beneficial things, of course, you're gonna, of course, things people can get a hold of right now, though. They better get a hold of it. They will not be available. They're shutting farms down left and right. Right. They'll give you a farm to grow some GMO corn and give you some money to do that. But if you start doing a natural farming, you're gonna run into issues and problems.
Right.
You just naturally will, and people are finding that out.
Right.
So people should look into that and be a real good area of study. Educate yourselves and get ready, because things are coming quicker than any of us can anticipate.
Right. But because he studied it, he knows how to come up with his own peat moss. But
Yeah, that's awesome, though.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, we have to get healthy. We have to know what we're doing. Take care of ourselves so we can be strong to face these things. And the other thing is get strong in the Word and no fear.
Yes. Yeah. No fear at all. The same. I have a saying, Sister Heidi has said. Our Savior Jesus Christ is the same one unleashing the seals. Nobody is worthy to loosen the seals, but our Savior is. Our Savior is not opening the seals for our destruction, but our full redemption. Our redemption process is going to be complete, not halfway. It's going to be complete. And so many of us already know there are areas of our lives we have not made a final decision in. And that time is coming. See, the world right now is not conducive of a final decision, because so long as it operates, people find themselves compromising in certain areas. When the world is damaged, when certain things no longer work in the world, we will not be compromised. That's when a person can say, that's when they can finally, they won't be pressed on all sides like that. And then that final decision can be made, because compromise is very real. It's just very real to a lot of people. They can't make a decision. Well, do I start my family, or do I start my family and do it the Lord's way, or do I compromise and feed my family? They can't make that decision. And God is a merciful God, not some cruel lawyer. So he's not a lawyer. There's no fine print. It's straightforward. We choose him or we don't. And so he's going to help our decision. Didn't he say he'd finish the work he began in us? He's the author and finisher of our faith. So those final decisions he will help us out with, and the world is going to suffer for that. Not us, the world. We're going to see that suffering. Not suffering enough for us, but we see it. We have that choice to make. The world is going to endure it. They will endure it. That means a lot of people we may know, they may endure exactly what the world endures, because every person has a choice. That choice cannot be forced on anybody. And all this stuff all of it's coming, all of it's forming. Hopefully, everybody can see it and just stand up spiritually. There's no need for fear. Fear is a lie itself. It's not even real. It's a construct of the imagination.
Amen. I love to hear it put that way. It's a lie itself.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's the way to put it. You want to chime in on this, Pastor Paul?
I'd love to. You guys are getting serious discussion here.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike, I love the fact when you're telling us that, all the different things of fake meat, the fake food, all the sugar. We have a saying that if it's white, it's not right. You don't want to white rice, white bread, and white sugar, and white flour. It's all bleached.
Yeah.
And it's not the natural. It's not the natural, and it will affect your health. But it mostly, Mike, I think when you said the 17 events that are coming, and you mentioned the unthinkable, I just have to ask. I can only think of a couple unthinkables. One would be a thermonuclear war, and the other maybe a deep impact. Are you hinting that one of those two is coming in 2023?
Yeah, one of those will come in 2023.
Yeah, if not both. One will come, folks. One will come. One will come.
One will come in 2023.
And so this is why we need to prepare people for such a time as this. Because, folks, reality is we're here. We're like James said, we're like a vapor in the water. We appear for a little while and then we vanish away. So you have to get your heart prepared, get your life prepared, get everything prepared, and mentally. I think Mike, you've been telling us all night that mentally people have to prepare themselves for what's happening.
Yeah.
And there's only really the best ways in the Word of God. Am I right?
Yes. That's right, Pastor Paul. Because you know what, Pastor Paul, life is a one-shot deal. This is one chance we get. One chance.
So how we treat our neighbor, how we treat one another, it's being recorded, okay? It really is being recorded, and we've got to be honest with folks.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a one-shot deal.
One-shot deal. Mike, I appreciate you tonight being here. I'm sorry I wasn't able to do it, but I'll tell you, Heidi's always on top of it, and she does a great job. And you brought out a lot of powerful information tonight. I think everyone realizes that it's getting serious now. Remember when you first started talking to me on the air back in 2013, You told me about a lot of things that were coming. Down the road, we're going to see this. A lot of things we're going to see that. But now we're talking about what we're seeing right now. And it's imminent, the events that is coming up on us now, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, they are. We're actually in that time. It's tough to see. It's tough for the average person.
And what Mike says happens. What he says is going to happen happens.
Even
we know this.
Deal with that we're in that time, but we're going to see more and more things. My biggest deal, Pascal, how much proof does a person need to get their life in order? Fear normally comes from a person putting things off. If we do everything we know how to do, fear cannot be established in us. And hopefully everybody will do everything they know how to do spiritually, and they won't have to deal with fear. And most importantly, they can be of help to somebody else.
Yesterday, folks, you may not know, but some of you have heard the interview I did with Mike over at my Patreon channel. It's the only place we put it because he brought some things out that we just couldn't talk about here on this open forum. But you need to go to Patreon and listen to what he said. A couple huge things he brought out that is significantly people need to prepare for. Right, Mike?
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate, but it's very unfortunate, Pascal. Like, you can only imagine the aftermath of that. Things are very close. They're very close.
When this happens, will this change the whole focus of the world? I mean, the world body.
Sure it will. Sure it will.
Yeah.
Sure it will. That will actually. Sure it will.
Yeah.
And although a lot of things sound they sound one way before it happens. After it happens, people normally say the same thing. I wish I would have known. That's what they say. I wish I would have known. And it's not about a person being right or wrong and all this kind of stuff. That's not what this is about. This is about humanity's preparation for the inevitable. Iniquity is rising beyond all levels. I mean, it's gone way beyond all levels. And people they don't really see some of the hidden movements. A lot of these nations, they are very real. They will never disclose them. But they're happening right before our faces. And they will ultimately consume quite a few lives. Ultimately.
One last question, Mike, and that is the hidden papers, or the Joe Biden papers now that have showed up or showing up here and there and everywhere. Is this the Democrat Party really saying goodbye to Joe because of these events that are coming? They got to get another leader kind of in place or prepare for 2024. What's going on here?
Good question.
Basketball, this is part of the governmental civil war.
Wow.
You're saying governments you're saying internal war.
Yeah.
At the governmental level is what you're saying. This is a governmental civil war, and it's going to brand new levels. So people ought to get ready for that.
Wow.
Appreciate your candor and your faithfulness, Mike. I'm going to interview you Sunday night at 5 o'clock for the webinar. Should people get their tickets now for the webinar? Should they get ready for what you got to say, Mike?
Sure. Yeah, they might want to buckle up twice for this one.
Oh my Lord! If it's
they might want to buckle up twice.
If you're going to reveal anything any stronger than what you did at Patreon the other day, I don't know. Maybe you'll go.
Well, there's still Pastor. There's still a big picture to cover. There's a lot to cover.
Well, we need to cover. That's what we want you to do. Is tell us the big picture for this webinar, and yeah, you got a lot to say. I know it. All right, I'll see you then Sunday night at 5 o'clock.
All right, Pastor. That sounds good. God bless you, Pastor Paul. General Heidi. Dr. Heidi. Sister Heidi. God bless you.
Well, she's all three.
Okay, I'll go back to that. There it is. Gary Wayne's take on the Essenes, and I'll hang up after that, guys. No, library, yes.
Other Nephilim in their belief system, and has a spark of the divine, or the spark of Seth intermitted in their descendants. So again, understand the allegory that's going in here right throughout. They have couple Gospels of the order of Melchizedek, or however you want to pronounce it. I like to go Melchi, as in taking it right back to Moloch, but I know most people like to pronounce that as Melchizedek. But understand that they have Gospels of this that they teach within Gnosticism, right? And again, this is why, this is how and why, not only as descendants of David, not only as descendants of Jesus, not only as descendants of Solomon, that they're going to draft as part of their pedigree this order for the Antichrist, as well as the King of Jerusalem, which is the King Saul inheritance and Benjamite inheritance of Jerusalem. So there's a lot more that you could go into in a lot of detail about who the Essenes are, but I think what I've been able to do is connect them from the beginning to the end and a whole bunch of information in between. And as it's so important today to be very, very careful of any Qumran documents, because it's essentially polytheism.
Well, let me ask you about the documents that they found, or the Dead Sea Scrolls. It seems like these guys are really on the ball. They really know what's going on. They know where they've put everything. What are the chances that was a coincidence? I mean, do you really think that some shepherd boy threw a rock in a cave and found these, or do you think that this was set up?
They knew it was there. That's just misdirection. But they have to create a story. They have to bring the world along in a manner that doesn't overwhelm them, right?
Sure.
Ready. And they purposely hid them, just as they purposely hid things under the temple. That includes in their belief system the genealogy of Jesus that they brought out of Jerusalem, which is part of the deception that they're going to bring in the end time, because they're obviously forged documents. But yeah, they knew where to go look, not only in the temple, but they knew where, because they had lots of time to prepare, because, I mean, this is a difficult area to get to, right?
Sure,
so
yeah.
They were able to hide them, and at that right time, which again, coincidentally comes after the creation of Israel, as we start to move into the end time, so that they can start moving the agenda forward. This is a connection in terms of timing of the discovery, and then how they roll that information out. And as we get more and more of it, which we are, that just shows us that we're getting closer to the end time.
Well, and it's interesting that they're actually about to allow, or they are going to go back and do another expedition at Qumran. It's actually a group of Christians wanting to do it. And, it's interesting because it makes you wonder, if they do have this much control over all this, are they going to find something that's hidden there, or are they just or is it just something they're going to go and probably not find anything? It's interesting to think about, because I've always wondered how a shepherd boy just out of nowhere finds these jars. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And these are things that change the views of a lot of believers. I mean, some for the good. I mean, the Book of Enoch gave us a lot of information and things like that, but a lot of people take it too far and they go too deep, and then they go over to the Gnostic side of things. So it is interesting.
Yeah, and even though I like the first book of Enoch, because it does run fairly parallel, I mean, understand, though, the first copy of that comes about is
okay, Jay, good night, mate.
And
I'm nearly out
translated
myself.
by a descendant of Robert the Bruce. His name's Alexander the Bruce, and he's a Freemason, and he's a Gnostic. So what did he corrupt?
Yeah, you got to wonder.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So even though that's why, just be careful. And I like that book. And one of the corruptions, or one of the markers, just might show up in chapter 60 of the first book of Enoch, where it says Enoch at that time is 550 years old. Well, that's not correct, because we know Enoch, son of Jared, was taken to heaven at 365 years of age. So is this then? And again, there's not too much corruption that I can see in the book of Enoch. I think they're just overlaying that book with their own Enoch.
Sure, and I think you're probably right. I mean, even in the Bible, Enoch is referenced. The book of Enoch is referenced. So you have to think that that text probably did exist back then, but you're right. How much did they corrupt it? If you have a Freemason who's translating this thing and giving it to the world, you got to be a little leery. And I think your approach is right. Be very, very careful with anything that's not canon, because you just don't No, but it is all very fascinating to read, and it is easy to get sucked in because it's a lot of interesting information, but some of it's not good information. It's just these groups amaze me at really how well they've kept this all together for so long, and you can see that really their purpose is to maintain this knowledge, the gnosis through time, and then to preserve this bloodline that will ultimately bring about the Antichrist. And you have to look at technology and think we're getting close. They're getting very close to where, if they wanted to, if we're talking, I mean, do you think the Antichrist is gonna be a hybrid that's created, or do you think this is just through breeding that the shell of the Antichrist is going to be made, that the enemy won't have it?
Well, we'll have to actually see how that comes about, but I think that God permits these groups to bring on the end time, and they do want to bring on this rendezvous with destiny, and they keep 3 well-initiated Antichrist figures ready to go all the time and hit in their pure bloods. And so, yes, they want to present the Antichrist at any time. The only thing that prevents them from moving forward, not that they're not ready, it's because of the restrainer.
Yeah, God has to pull that back. Absolutely.
Yeah. So as soon as that happens, they'll move very, very quickly.
Well,
and they've been trying to do it at any time other than the ordained time, but they will accept the ordained time.
And that, that has to do with us. Are we going to turn to God and do what we're supposed to, or are we not? That's why we have free will. Free will is given to us to decide basically when the end is going to come. If we turn completely away, he's going to pull the restrainer. It's going to happen. And it really makes me wonder with this recent election and things happening. I believe right now we are at one of those points in history when 100 years from now, if we even have that long, they're either going to look back and they're going to say, wow, this is the time that the world or America for sure either turned to God and we had amazing revival, or this is where they really blew it and it all went down the toilet,
And I think this is very much a turning point. And again, I don't put dates, and I'm not a prophet, but I think we're starting in a direction to bring this time on. Not only this election at this intersection and the repercussions, whatever those might be, that will help accelerate things, but just other things coming together. So when you look at 1967 or 1947 and add a generation to that, and I'm talking about the birth of Israel and the birth of and the taking of Jerusalem in 67, you have a window if you use 7 years as a generation, which I know you can't technically do, but we know the generation of the fig tree, we have to pick a number per generation. So it's a little more or a little bit less, but probably a little bit more, if anything. Then it's either you open up a window from 2017 to 2037 for the end times.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you look at the prophecy of Jubilees coming out of, again, you have to be careful of the source, but Judaism, where you have 10 Jubilees, and we are now entering in the last Jubilees, which is finishing the last Jubilees in 1917. It starts the end time. That sort of brings that sort of belief system. And if people don't know the prophecy of Jubilees, that basically, it was made in the 12th century, and it begins with the Ottoman Empire in 1617, and then their reign ends in 1917 in World War I, which is, basically 400 years or 8 Jubilees. And then you have one Jubilee where the land remains desolate, which takes us to 1967. And then you have the last Jubilee until the end time begins. So that's the Jubilee prophecy. And then you have the Catholic prophecy of Malachi, with Francis being the last pope and the anti-pope and the black pope, which all makes sense from a Jesuit, preparing the way for the false prophet and bringing down Roman Catholicism and changing the doctrine. And you see things shaping up that this window might be the window. But again, anybody who has tried to predict the time of the end time has been wrong. So I want to be very careful of that. But I do think this is a significant period we're about to enter into.
Well, the Bible's very clear that no man is ever going to know the time,
Yes.
But these are very, very interesting times. I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe as a country, we've gone way too far over the edge, maybe the guy that we all think is going to be the one who helps us bring it in the right direction is actually the opposite,
Well,
I don't know.
You have, and I think, no matter what, whoever would have won the election, I think would move it in the direction of, bringing on world government and the world religion. But, we have to understand that we're going to have these very powerful oligarchs rise up, and we're going to have these kings that are over these groups of nations, and so you have to have these almost larger than normal personalities, and you start to see it. You see what, the premier of China is trying to do to extend and consolidate power in this length of time. You've got Putin that's basically usurped. You wonder whether Trump becomes something like that and becomes, part of the Western sort of representative. But there are going to be people like these kinds of people that are going to be representatives of the 10 groups of nations that form the world government.
Well, yeah, you have Erdogan in Turkey who, he has people left and right telling him that he's the Mahdi, and he believes it. And he's positioning himself for that. And I can easily see, where if evangelicals especially do not hold Trump to what he says he's going to do, and they just sit back and go, oh, life's great. We got our guy in. Let's just back him 100%. Wow. You don't ever back a politician 100%. For one, our faith is not in man, it's in God. If you're putting your faith in man, you're already in the wrong place. If we don't put our faith in God and realize that he is the one we turn to fix things, if we don't get our souls right, our lives right, our families right, it's not going to matter who's in place, and to blindly put our faith in a man is a scary proposition,
Exactly. So anyway, I think we're in interesting times, and I'm not predicting the end of the world, right? Like in the next 7 years. We're definitely not in the last 7 years, but I think we're also told that we would recognize the signs of the times between the geopolitical makeup and the technology and what society is doing. I recognize world government and a world religion and the ability for the Jewish people to do their sacrifice on a wing of the temple are difficult things to overcome. But I think things are moving in a position where all those things can happen in a fairly short period of time if the right cataclysms or the right coming together events permit it. But that also requires the removal of the restrainer as well.
Well, when it comes to the third temple, it's interesting because I was listening to a show. I actually produced a show with Pastor Casper McLeod and Pastor Paul Begley. And Paul Begley spends a lot of time in Jerusalem, and he talks to a lot of the top rabbis, and he had an interesting conversation there where one of the top rabbis basically insinuated that they have the Ark of the Covenant. They have it. And all they really need to do, they have everything for the third temple is prefabbed, ready to go. All they have to do is put it up. We're not talking about some mega stone structure, It doesn't have to be that. And so they're ready to go. As soon as they have the place, they have everything. Once it's set up, they're ready to roll. So literally, it can happen quick.
You have two paths to how the sacrifice can be done. One, if you sort of think a little bit about what Daniel says, where the sacrifice is done on the wing of the temple, is that on the wing of the Dome of the Rock?
Yeah.
But what I tend to think is that the location of the Dome of the Rock is not the location where the temple was. It's right beside it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at Josephus's instructions, who again lived there at that time, he's very specific, and that would put it just a very short distance from the Dome of the Rock along that rock ridge.
So it's doable.
Almost like that crescent sort of thing that goes down into the valley. And so if he's correct on and the understanding of his directions are correct, then that temple could be built there.
Yeah, Gary, we are living in some amazing times. it doesn't scare me a lot. I know a lot of people get scared. I don't know why. If you believe what the Bible says, you know where you're going, whatever. I just think that we are been given the privilege of being alive in some very, very interesting times, and we're going to see where it goes. But another amazing show, my friend. I appreciate you coming on. I learned so much every time. I can't ever get over. I like how you really lay out for me how all these things are so intricately put together, and the layers and the layers and the layers, and they're very, very smart. And they are very, very patient, and they've been doing this since the beginning of time, and so they have a game plan. They're probably they're probably way more invested than most Christians are, unfortunately. So I would say that we need to step our game up as Christians and get invested, because this is a war in the spirit, not in the flesh. And they're not playing. This is real, and so it is fascinating stuff.
And they plan to destroy Christianity as we know it and rebuild it and overlay it with polytheism and deceive even the elect if that were possible. And
sure,
seemingly it will be. So if you're not totally entrenched in what the Bible says and in your faith,
get
you
entrenched.
will be deceived.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, I thank you so much for coming on. Let's give everybody an idea of where they can find all your stuff. I know they can go to Amazon.com to find your book.
Okay, guys, I'm out. It was an interesting stream. Let's see what Mike from around the world. Let's see what happens with what he said. Okay, guys, God bless.